Greetings and good morning wishes. To those for whom it's morning, and for everybody else, good day to you as well. Let's open up the YouTube comments here. Hi to everybody out there on YouTube. And who else should we say hi to? Twitter, I guess? Let's go say hi to Twitter. We'll get our message out there. Yo, Charlie, how you doing? Whoa. Thank you. Very kind. I am doing very well. Yeah. All right. And just like that, I've also tweeted, I think. Let's turn off the sound on this phone thingamajigger. Yeah, I'm a bit slow, Charlie, when it comes to learning new technologies and thingies, So to switch from Twitter to some other social media thing where I can post when there are dojo tournaments is not obvious to me. Yeah, like switching from Twitch to Kick would be very difficult for me as well, if there were some really strong reason to do so, which I don't know of yet. Anyway, here's the Chess Dojo Club and upcoming events. Folks on Twitch, you can hit !play to find links to today's tournaments. Folks on YouTube, you'll need to navigate your way here, through the Chess Dojo Club. Yeah, check this out. I made 2,500. Woohoo! Yeah, if you've never used it, it's easy not to use it, Putsy. Like me personally, I've never used Facebook or Instagram or TikTok. Well, I've never used anything other than Twitter, I guess, within the social media world. And to try to use one of those would be difficult for me, I mean, it's just like a hump to get over. It's not like I couldn't do it if I were really, really motivated, but I would just have to be motivated. Which I'm not particularly. All right, Burrell is going to need this link over here, I think, to get to the tournaments. How's Magnus Carlsen versus the world going? Whoa. Let's see if I can join now. Still can't join. What is this move? He played d4. So he wants e4, f4. Of course, he wants his queen on d4. We go knight c6. He plays knight b3. Hey, Skivix. I don't think I can move on this board. I'm tempted to investigate pawn takes f4, c5, protecting the extra pawn. Yeah, same with me, Jay. I'm supposed to be the world team's coach, one of them, but they can't seem to get me into the world team. I mean, at first blush, it seems like surely one has to take. But this move here also comes to mind as being conceivable. Okay, so let's have a look at today's tournaments. The time control is going to be 15 plus 5. It's an arena that lasts 3 hours long. So you could play about 6 games today if you played coast to coast the full 3 hours. Of course, you can also play a couple games and then take off or join late, etc. Looks like we've got one player over 1,300 in the under 1,300 section. Oops. So complicated to read. Oh, email from Charlotte Chess Club. Cool. We've got Stopped Clock in chat saying, I want to play, but I fear getting smoked. And I noticed that Stopped Clock is already entered in the tournament, which is, I think, the correct resolution of that kind of situation when you want to play and you're afraid of getting smoked. I've been smoked. What's the worst that could happen? You get smoked again? It's okay. Losing is okay. You know? My chess is also not at its lifetime peak, Stopped Clock, but I still want to play chess. You know, I don't want to stop playing chess for the rest of my life just because I will never again be at my peak, maybe. Right? The arena starts in 12 minutes. Welcome to the dojo, Ani. And here are links. Do you know if your chess.com rapid rating is above or below 1300 or 1700? We've got 3 groups. The first group is for under 1300. The second group is for those between 13 and 1700. And the third group is for those over 1700. Listen to myself, yeah. Sometimes we just got to listen to ourselves. So, Charlie, you're saying that people who you know in real life dismiss your thoughts and experiences in favor of what they hear on TV or something? Oscar Chess is no longer afraid of anyone other than Blunderfest. That's fair. I mean, I fear Magnus. It's okay to fear a few people. It's reasonable. But we don't want to live our entire lives in fear, right? So, yeah. So Oscar Chess can fear Magnet. I can fear Blunderfest. I can fear Magnus. And Stop Clock, you can fear 1 or 2 people, but hopefully still play. Yes, Cubix, that's right. I've always wanted 960 classical tournaments. Forever and ever. What's your suggestion, Jay Anand? I think Hockey Chess Dude, you know how different characteristics make different things likely, right? It's not like all people of a certain type find themselves in a certain position, right? It's not like all smart people become doctors or all dumb people become doctors or all doctors are smart or all doctors are dumb, right? It's never like all of them. But there are certain characteristics that increase one's chances of X or Y or Z, right? Like being born rich might increase your chance of becoming a doctor compared to being born poor because medical school costs whatever, $300,000 plus an undergrad degree. So you'll have some people who are born poor and manage to do the whole thing and are in debt and all that. But you'll find more people who are born wealthy. So when I think of like the characteristics that map to being rich, the number one characteristic that maps to being rich is not being smart. And that's far from the strongest correlation, shall we say, right? Or the highest percentage. The number one characteristic that maps towards being rich is being born rich. And that is random as far as intelligence. Then the second most closely linked characteristic is having poor morals, being selfish, greedy, not caring about other people. And that's really like 1,000 times more important than being smart or not. I can see 1,000 ways to get rich and avoid all of them because they're all ways of being unkind and treating other people incorrectly around you. All right, Ani says there's something that would be easier for all viewers. Pin the arena. Okay. So we're going to take this play command and we're going to pin it at Ani's suggestion. There you go. We're going to pin it for 120 minutes. All right, Ani. Hopefully that's easier for some folks to find the tournament. We got 926 Andy in here. Hey, Andy. Hope you have a good tournament today. Stop clock, you're afraid of not giving your opponents a decent game. Yeah, I understand that kind of fear as well. The Discord has the flu. Wow. Falgry, you know more tech speak than I do at this point. The Discord has the flu. I don't know exactly what that means, but I believe you. and I hope you'll enjoy hanging out here with the tournament crowd. It is a bad feeling to feel like you didn't give your opponent a good game. I understand that sentiment, yeah. But I believe that most of the time you will give your opponent a good game. And you can't fully control for it, so you just have to play. Oh, Countersparks is here. We haven't seen Countersparks play for a little while. Very strong player in the 1700 plus section. Countersparks today. Nice. Good to see them. Looks like they've gone up another 100 points since I used to see them playing frequently in the weekend tournaments. And also, folks, it's your chance to get spanked by a super grandmaster today. Jack Stenglein is playing in the 1700 plus Rapid Arena, a super grandmaster of coding. In chess, he's a strong human being. In coding, he's a super grandmaster. All right. Hello to you, Carl, and welcome. Quantum, don't bother sending me a challenge because I won't accept it today. Right now, we're running a viewer tournament, and my job is to provide commentary on the games, which are starting in 4.5, 5 minutes. So I need to be free to do that commentary gig. Yeah. Enjoy your dinner, Putsy. And have a good evening. We've got nice weather here in California, by the way. Which is putting Playful Squirrel in a good mood. All right, so hello to Walford Net Cafe asking, how do the arenas work? If you sign up, do you have to play a certain amount of games? No, you can play any number of games, basically, over the course of 3 hours. So you would start with one game when you join the arena. By default, it'll try and pair you, but each time you finish a game, you have to click a button to say that you want to be paired for another game. Otherwise, it automatically pauses the tournament for you every time you finish one game. So you can take whatever breaks you want, restart a game whenever you want. It's just open in that way. I think a good number of games, if you want like a tournament feeling, is 4 games. If I play 4 games, I feel like I've played a full tournament, right? But, I mean, some people may just drop in to play one game, and then go on about their day. And that's fine, too, right? That's just the feeling of playing a game. What is your rating, Harm? You could try joining. I mean, normally for these rapid tournaments, you might need to have played one game to get in. I'm not sure, but you could try. Our under 1300 arena is set so that you don't need any games played, but I don't know if you're under 1300 or, if you don't even have a rating, maybe you don't know if you're under 1300. 4 Nights Bourbon, bravo to you. I always think the players in the tournament with the lowest rating and the highest rating, I think players with the lowest rating and the highest rating always have to be a little bit brave. I mean, I guess to some extent everybody has to be a little bit brave, right? Like Stopped Clock is afraid of losing a game so badly that afterwards their opponent complains that Stopped Clock wasted their time. I think that's the fear, right? Like, I played so badly that my opponent feels like I wasted their time. They would have rather played a better game with someone else. So to some extent, we all can have some fears, and we all might need to be brave now and then to play in a tournament. But I feel particularly when you're the highest rated player or the lowest rated player, you need a little bit of bravery, because sometimes the lowest rated player feels like, oh, I'm just going to get beat on every single game and maybe feel like I don't belong, right? Like I'm not good enough for this event. And the highest rated player also is in a position where it's like, if I don't win the tournament, then I'm not as good as my rating, right? I can't I don't get a chance to beat anyone above me. I just have to play everyone below me. I'm expected to win. Do you guys, have some of you hopefully seen Searching for Bobby Fischer, a fantastic move in which this little kid becomes a chess wizard and gets really into it, and he's playing in tournaments, and his ranking goes up, and finally at some point he becomes, instead of like the surprisingly good player, he becomes known to be really good. And then he says, maybe it's better not to be the best. Then you can lose and it's okay. You know, because he's reached a point where he's expected to win by everybody, especially including his father. So anytime he loses a game, his father's going to be disappointed. Like, hey, what happened to you? What are you doing? Why did you lose to this person below you? Well, once everybody's below you, are you no longer allowed to lose? That's lame and terrifying in its own way, you know? Winning 7 games in a row and knowing that if you lose the 8th game, you're a failure, could be just as terrifying as thinking you're probably going to lose all 6 or 7 games you play, right? If you're expected to lose all 6 or 7 games, but you manage to win 1, that can already be like a victory, you know? You can only go up from there. So I would say we can recognize the special bravery right now of Associativity, rated 2297 master level rating in the over 1700 section. And in our under 1300 section, we have holding up the bottom of the tournament with a rating of 563, Strike Gold, aka 4 Nights Bourbon. So good for you, 4 Nights Bourbon. By playing in the tournament, you make other players rated 3, 4, 500 more comfortable playing in the tournament as well, you know? Like sometimes we get players come in who are rated 300 or 100 and they say, oh, I don't know if I should play, you know, everybody's so much higher rated than me, maybe I wouldn't fit in, you know? And, and the tournament started, folks. Let's begin the commentary. Good luck to everybody who's playing. Have fun. Have fun. Oh, and vote for Cigar wherever you are. You are definitely in the wrong section, my friend. Vote for Cigar. You should not be in the under 1300 arena, please. 2000 is way too high. There's a much better group for you, the 1700 plus group. Can you find your way to it, my friend? Look here, there's a 1700 plus arena. I'm going to send the link to both chats in case you're somewhere out there on Twitch or on YouTube. Go to the 1700 plus arena. You'll find other players rated about 2000 who you can have a great game with. And let us go and do some commentary on this battle between Walford Net Cafe and Strike Gold. Walford Net Cafe, you're correct. You should turn off stream while playing because I'm going to talk about your game. And you can rewatch the video on demand later to maybe pick up some things from the commentary. Same for 4 Nights Bourbon. Yeah. All right. So we get a start of a game is e4, e5 here from the players, and then the knight comes out attacking the e5 pawn, putting some pressure on 2 central squares. Beautiful move. Black counters with a comparable move, knight c6, protecting the pawn and the same 2 central squares. Bishop b5. A perennial classic opening, the Rui Lopez coming out from Walford Net Cafe. This applies consistent pressure against the same pair of squares by going after the knight and possibly the king on that same diagonal. So classy opening from Walford Net Cafe. Black plays d6, protecting the e5 pawn with the pawn and preparing for this bishop to come out. White continues rapid development with a second knight, and black plays bishop d7, developing again and taking off some of this pressure on this diagonal. So very, very logical moves to kick off this lowest rated match of the first round today. And props to these players. They obviously know the basics of opening principles already. You know, we're not seeing any, random pawn moves on the side or kings running up, nor are we seeing one piece move around in circles. In my day, if you had a game between players of this rating, it would probably start with the queen starting to run around, and then the queen would just sort of keep trucking and head over here, and you'd see her moving around in circles. In fact, my brother at this level, hockey chess dude, my brother once playing white in this position had a player play queen h4 against him, going after f2 and e4, and my brother spotted knight takes h4, so he eventually won that game. It was a team tournament between different scholastic programs, Berkeley against Fremont. Okay, so knight c6, so we're getting very logical moves from these players. d3 opening the way for this bishop. And now we get the first non-obvious move, let's say, from black. They move the knight a second time looking for a particular trade, right? Maybe the bishops, maybe the knights, maybe both. And this is the first particular move because the simple moves in this position would be like knight f6 and bishop e7, right? Just continuing to move new pieces into the game. Those would be like the simplest level 1 candidate moves, right? Just bringing out pieces. When I was a young player, I loved the idea of getting some kind of advantage in the center with my pawns. And so you would have seen me play like this kind of move when I was just getting started. I liked playing an opening. I didn't know the name because I didn't know that openings even had names, much less what the names were. But I liked playing an opening, which I now know is called the Philidor counter gambit, which is you defend your e-pawn with your d6 pawn. You make this kind of a pawn chain. So you've got one pawn solid or safe in the center, you think, on e5. And then you grab extra with your f-pawn. And I thought that was like the dream, I thought that was the dream, to get a little something extra in the opening. Now I know that when you're playing black, it's really hard to get away with those kind of extra moves. As black, you've got to usually be a little bit more patient before you kind of throw this stuff at your opponent. And so nowadays you'll find me playing moves like knight f6 probably. I'm sorry if it's boring, but that's where I've ended up. And I guess I'm learning that you can wait till a little bit later in the game, and something spicy always comes up eventually, Part of the thing was, I guess, before I was a little bit impatient, right? And now I'm a little bit more patient. I understand that even if the first couple moves look, let's say, boring, so to speak, like I would say a lot of players would call this particular opening position here a little bit boring, or at least players who start from my kind of aggressive mindset, because nobody's attacking nobody, right? They're all just doing correct things. They've set up a pawn structure. They've got knights on good squares. Nobody's getting attacked or messing up. So, in a previous lifetime, most of my professional career, I thought these kind of opening positions were boring, and I didn't have the patience to wait for the game to get interesting some moves later. Now I understand, and I have this confidence. I know that no matter how simple the start of the game, whether it be a Collie or a London or a Gioco Pianissimo, any of the openings that get maligned for being non-fighting openings, I know that eventually the game will get interesting. Every chess game goes through an interesting period, no matter where it starts. So I think I'm finally, with that realization, being able to be a little bit more, starting to rein in a little bit my need to play some crazy move like f5 too soon. Although it's still a certain kind of ingrained habit. I still do throw out moves like that from time to time. So knight d4 was played. Let's see what trading choice Walford Net Cafe made. They chose to keep their bishop. Okay, so likes the bishop, preserves it on this diagonal here, and black goes after it with b5, and white keeps saving that piece. But now black's creating some serious pressure on this knight on f3 and this diagonal with the queen hiding behind it. What is white going to do about that? They go for an exciting sacrifice. See, folks? It doesn't take long to get exciting, does it? Oscar Chess wonders if white might not even have been able to try this insane move named after Le Gall, sacrificing the queen. That lurking queen, right? Opens up the diagonal between the bishop and queen. And after bishop takes queen, bishop f7 check, king e7, knight d5. The black king gets checkmated in the middle of the board by a couple rogue white minor pieces. This does work in this exact position. Very well spotted by Oscar Chess. And once you get to this position, you're golden. You have just won a beautiful game. Here, you don't even need to fear if Blunderfest is playing black Oscar Chess. You were cruising here with the minor pieces. Traps and zaps from the opening. So this game did not take long to get spicy, you know. Within 2 moves of us saying like, oh, you know, this pawn structure, I want to, you know, do something crazy with f5. Within 2 or 3 moves, we've got an option, a choice here for white between knight e5 and bishop f7. 2 zippy tactical moves. We saw that knight e5 does work. Let's check if bishop f7 works, right? King takes, knight g5, opening up the queen to the bishop with the idea that if the king retreats, white's going to come here and then go after the king with the queen and knight. Plus a piece has been won back, right? Okay, but black sacrifices the queen on g5. Ooh! Defending the bishop on g4. Wow. Bishop g5, bishop d1. Who knows who's got more pieces at the end of this? The answer is black. Black has correctly calculated that this sequence here can be defended with this queen takes g5 sack. Woo! Beautiful. Comes out fine for black. Black has an extra knight hiding here on g8. If black brings out these 3 kingside pieces, we're going to feel that extra knight. But at the moment, black's playing what I would call an overly aggressive move here with b4. And they're playing it a little bit too fast as well. Black might be feeling like a genius right now because they have just pulled off a fantastic and accurate tactical sequence. It's not every day you see somebody rated 500 pull off an accurate and tactical sequence. In fact, sometimes you might have to wait a week to see it. But here it's just happened. The problem is black might be too hyped up and pumped up because now I see they're making moves in 5 or 6 seconds after this. And in this position, your priority should still be developing more pieces. And black might still be in the mindset like, I want to do something aggressive. I want to do something aggressive. Okay, look, they snapped out of it. 20 seconds on this move, which is reasonable for a rapid game. And they start developing pieces. Maybe they've managed to calm down and catch their breath from that early flurry of tactics in this game. Very nice move, bishop e7. To my mind, the best move in the position and the one I would definitely play. White supports the bishop with the plan of developing some pressure from the rook if black trades. That makes a lot of sense. Also, definitely an option to run away with your bishop and just keep more pieces on the board because you're behind. And I think one of the most important concepts when you're starting out in chess is this concept of how to play when you've got more or less pieces than your opponent, right? So when you've got more pieces than your opponent, you generally want to trade off the remaining pieces so it becomes clearer and simpler to checkmate their king with your extra pieces. Or if you don't have enough extra pieces to checkmate the king, by trading off all the pieces, it becomes easier for you to use your pawns to make a new queen. And then you can go about checkmating the king. That's usually how it goes. When you've got extra material, you trade things down towards what we call an endgame. And in the endgame, there's less pieces in the way, and you can advance one of your pawns all the way to the end of the board, get a new queen, and use that to checkmate and win the game. Now, from the opposite side, if you are the player who has one piece less, so in this case, white, generally you want to keep more pieces on the board so there's more chances for some exciting stuff to still happen. You know, some attacks, defenses, counterattacks, and so forth. Some trading, some attacking, etc., where your opponent might make a mistake and you could make up some of that disadvantage that you're at. All right, so h6 gets played. Hey, Ani, Which section are you in, Ani? Man, this vote for cigar person just does not know where they are, what's going on. They're still in the under 1300 group. You're in the 2000 plus. Okay. Let me go check on the 2000 plus tournament, see if it's working out. Vote for cigar is your ID. Okay, you're the person who's confused, cigar. Ani, cigar. You're in the wrong tournament. You're still in this under 1300 tournament. Maybe now you've moved out of it finally, I don't know. But I'm still seeing you in the under 1300 section. Let me go check if you found your way into the 1700 plus as well. Let me go look for you. I made announcements, personal announcements for you, Ani Cigar, several times. There you are. You're in the right section now. And you've played a game. You must be very confused if you've played a game and won it without even noticing. But you are correctly in the 2000 plus section and you have won a game. So if you can hear me, which I don't think you can, congratulations. All right. The over 1700 section looks like it's got a good number of players, 13 players, several masters. Fantastic battles, I'm sure. We're going to keep commenting this game here from the under 1300, though. Strike versus Walford. So let me go back to the under 1300 arena for a second myself. How are you doing, Chess Gone Mad? Well, it looks like White's gotten something going here with the White Rook. Let's see how that transpired while we were trying to help Cigar to find their way to the right event. I actually have a friend named Cigar here in Berkeley. Okay, so after h6, right, so White decided they weren't willing to trade if it developed the Black Rook. And not only that, but this pawn would then sort of be in the knight's face. So White tried to convince Black, like, no. I know you want me to trade on g5, but why don't you trade on e7? And Black was unconvinced, right? They're like, nope, keeping my little piece. Where's Anushka, asks Mustafa. I don't know. I taught a lesson with her on Friday. That doesn't mean I know where she is at every moment. If I had to guess, I would guess she's studying chess somewhere. Mari, I don't watch the games of the people who ask me to watch their games. Because those people are generally listening to commentary and trying to... I don't know why they want to play a game while listening to me tell them what moves to play. But it's all right. I can explain it to you a little further. You don't need to worry about, I'm sorry or anything like that. Mustafa, you were also studying chess. I see you, Mustafa. But basically, Mari, like when I'm commenting on the game, like when you're playing a game, you're supposed to come up with all your own moves, and you're supposed to focus on your game, not talk to other people about the game while you're playing. Chess is considered to be an individual sport during the game. Of course, we've got a great community and camaraderie together, right? So we're happy to talk about games before and after them, Like before the game, you can be like, oh man, I've got this new opening I can't wait to try, The Czech Benoni maybe, right? Can't wait to try out my Czech Benoni. And I'll be like, oh yeah, cool, sounds fun. Hope you have a good one with the Czech Benoni. I've heard that if White puts their pawn on a4, you should put your pawn on b6 or something like that. Then your game starts. The moment your game starts, I'm not going to tell you another thing about the Czech Benoni. You feel me? Like as soon as your game starts, I'm like, okay, can't tell you anything more about the four knights or the Czech Benoni. Like you're on your own. And then when your game is done, you come talk to me, So... really while you're playing your game, you want to either mute the stream or close the stream, play your game, and when your game is done, if you feel like playing another game, keep going. If you feel like talking with your opponent, chat with them after the game. Ask them where they thought, the game turned. When was it good for white or black, etc. And also, if you really want to talk with a lot of people about your game, come into chat and chat with us about your game. But for now, while you're playing, nobody who's playing the tournament should be listening to the commentary. Hopefully, I explained that in a way that makes sense to folks. Now, let's get further into this strike gold game, okay? So let's see if strike gold can pull off the extra piece. Here, Walford gets the rook active. Boom. So good job, strike gold, bringing out these pieces, but now we're going to have to deal with the rook's threats. So first they saved the knight, which is a good choice. Then they brought out their own rook, which is also a good choice. And now this rook goes on the attack, which seems like a pretty good choice as well. Things get exciting. Black wins another piece. Oh no! This bishop, if it moves, black wins this knight. Oh, that was a powerful attack from the rook, attacking lots of things. White saw the bishop was attacked and saw the pawn was attacked and used the bishop to defend the pawn. But it's not enough. The only way out of this probably would have been to trade the knight while leaving the bishop hanging. And then if black takes your knight, then you save your bishop. And if black takes your bishop, then you save the knight. But that's hard to see. So white went bishop c1. Black takes the knight. Great move from black. Bishop comes back out. Black doubles the rooks. And we've caught up with the live position. Strike gold. Lowest rated player in the tournament. Looks like they might possibly strike a win in their very first game. It's looking very possible. Black has a threat of rook c1 check, sacrificing the knight to capture the rook on h1. And black also has 2 extra pieces. So there's a whole lot of good options for black in this position here. Black should have traded bishops when they had the chance, asks Adam. I think so too, Adam. Yeah, I would have just gone for the trade as soon as it was possible for me. Indeed. Yeah, I would have gone here, 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 even though it lets my opponent's rook into the game. And in fact, Adam, like at a master level, I see rook c1, rook c7 coming. And I know that it's going to be much harder for me to win this endgame if white's rook gets to c7, plus if I lose a pawn, right? So in this position here, I actually would have played probably knight to d4 from black after trading bishops. And the point is so I can always answer rook c1 with a move like c5 and not give up that pawn. And obviously I still need to get these pieces out, but I would prioritize not letting white get that active rook attack. So I would make the first trade, which I can do immediately, and then I would go knight d4. That would be, I don't want to say necessarily the best technique. That would be my technique, which is... My technique is good enough that I could win this position 100% of the time, I can't necessarily win a tricky endgame with an extra pawn that Magnus Carlsen can win, but an endgame with an extra knight like this, I can win it 100% of the time with my technique. So to that extent, my technique's probably useful for the players in the under 1300 section here, which is I would accept the trade, even though it lets this out, but I would not allow this the complications of rook c1, rook c7. I wouldn't let that rook into the game. So after the first trade, I would go knight d4. If white trades, it's not the best for my pawn structure, but again, I'm happy to make the trade. Things are just getting so simple for me. And if rook c1, I have c5, and I know white has no immediate threat, so I will be able to get around to my development with knight e7 thereafter. Yeah. You were also thinking of knight d4 next? Good. I think that's good, solid technique, Adam, for this level here. And Chris asks, a higher rated question. What are you doing here, Chris, with your strong, higher rated player questions? Chris asks, would it maybe be better, or does it not matter if we play c5 first? Just because we know rook c1's the only move, and we know our knight's coming to d4, and then we've got more of a brace on how we recapture. And the answer is, Chris, I don't really see how it matters, actually. At at your level even. You know, I think c5 or knight d4 pretty equal at up to a 2400 level. I don't really discern a big difference between them. All right, so we got the rook coming to c7, but Strike Gold did react to it really well. They didn't worry and play overly defensive moves. They actually reacted aggressively to the rook coming in, counter the open file, trying to get black's rooks into the game, right? And then landed this powerful rook c2 themselves. And very quickly, we see them winning another piece, doubling up rooks on the open file. Knight g3 check, capturing the rook and the pawn. And, oh man, Strike Gold is doing great here. They've got an extra 1 rook and 1 knight at this point. Doubling rooks on the second rank is a nice way to try and clean up some pawns and advance the game from here. Yeah, it's good. I think chess in my veins that Anirudh Sagar, it's their first time here, so we have to be kind and gentle with them. It might also be their first time on the internet or using a computer, because they type in all caps. They seem to be sometimes listening to the commentary but not understanding me telling them that during their games they're not supposed to be listening to the commentary. They joined the under 1300 tournament at first, even though their rating is 2075 and they belong in the over 1700. So they're just a little bit new, and we just have to be a little bit patient with them. They're clearly very good at chess to be over 2000, but maybe new to like computers and the internet a little bit. So we just have to be gentle. But Sagar, if you can hear me, on the internet, typing in all caps is read as shouting. So to me and to other people in the chat, when you tell me what to do in all caps, it feels like you're shouting at me and yelling at me. Which, like, how would you feel in real life, right? If you were sitting in a room with some friends and you didn't know me, and I came into the room and I screamed at you, "Analyze my game for me now!" And you're like, I don't even know this dude. I don't know this guy who just showed up and is just, I came over to you and I stood next to you and you've got your friends around you. You're already in a conversation with them. And I just come and stand right next to you and just start screaming at you. You'd be like, what is going on? Who is this dude? You wouldn't be able to say, who is this David guy? Because you wouldn't even know my name was David, right? But essentially, that's what you're thinking. You're like, Black's looking for this back rank mate. And Strike Gold strikes gold. Hooray to our brave lowest rated player who has won a game in the tournament today. So just imagine that, Sagar. I know you're probably currently tuning out the whole the whole everything I say. But imagine how you would react to that. And then that's how we're sort of going to be primed to react to you coming into our chat room for the first time and screaming at us like that in all caps and telling me what to do. No pleases, no maybe David, no thought of like maybe David knows what he's doing. Maybe he's been doing this for 20 years at this point. Well, let me see. When did I first start commenting chess tournaments on stream? 2009. So 16 years. Maybe I've been doing it for 16 years. Maybe I will comment the under 2000 games. Maybe I've got a pace and a plan. Maybe I've got some idea what I'm doing. Maybe check out what's happening somewhere before telling the people in that place how they should be doing what they're doing. Like if I came into your chess club and you were sitting around with your friends playing games and talking, the first thing I would do personally is I would observe. I would be like, let me listen a little bit, see who these people are, see what they're up to, see what they're talking about, right? Like Hockey Chess Dude says, reading a room, And then, once I had a feeling what was going on, I might say, "Hi, my name's David." Is it okay for me to come in here and join your club? And people would probably say, of course, come in. That's how chess clubs work. I've never had somebody say, no, get out of my chess club. But that's how it starts. So we're about to see something else about how these chess tournaments usually work. I've got multiple sections. I almost always start with the lowest rated section for the first game to make sure that people who are new get some love and realize that they don't need to be embarrassed for being rated 200 or 400 or whatever it is. I want them to feel comfortable and like they do belong in a chess tournament setting. And then I'm going to go through all the sections and comment games from every section in sequence. That was our first game. Congratulations to Strike Gold on that one. Now we're going to the 13 to 1700 section, and we're going to pick a game here. So we've got an end game here between Scotch Solves All. Maybe the Scotch opening, although White didn't play the Scotch opening this game. Maybe Scotch like the drink. So it's an equal material rook endgame that immediately fascinates me, but I'm going to click on one or two other games. We've got another player who's afraid to get going. Stopped clock. This one's a very close matchup. 1568 against 1564. They're well balanced. DJ Creech is in time trouble. Throws a wild tactical move. Does this work? If we take the queen, they take the queen. If we take the rook, they take the bishop. Creech might flag this game, but it looks like they may have correctly calculated this wild rook takes h3 move. The material was equal last move, basically. 3 minor pieces, 2 rooks, queens. So an exciting position. I think we just saw Creech pull out a very accurate, cold-blooded calculation using 20 out of 60 seconds to play that move. And now Black should be ahead a little bit over here. Yeah, exactly, Hockey Chess Dude. The competition in these tournaments is very tough because it's most all dojoers, and they're all people who are working on their game and who are improving. But if you lose points during the tournament each week and then learn something from it and play well the rest of the month, you go up gradually anyway. So here we've got an interesting position as well with some time trouble for Professor of Prophylaxis. Playing here with White down a pawn, and the White king is in more danger than the Black king. They both seem a bit open, right? Each king is a little bit open. But the problem for the White king is this pawn on h3. That's a thorn. That's like an extra attacking piece. So if I'm White, I think my priority is to get rid of that pawn. Professor agrees. Professor agrees, right? Like you could look for moves like rook d1, attacking your opponent for sure. And if you had more than 40 seconds on the clock, maybe you'd spend a little bit of time calculating rook d1 versus queen h3. But here, we just got to get rid of that h-pawn. Black takes on b4. Now follows discovered check, but there's queen takes rook. So this is going to be intense here. This is going to be intense right here now. Yeah, Oscar Chess, you also lose your points during the dojo tournaments and you gain them back elsewhere. If you're a certain level of chess, you don't need to worry about losing your rating points because they'll always come back, right? Just let your rating tell you how good or bad you are instead of worrying about trying to make it high. Professor chooses to avoid a queen trade. I agree. Black is now up 2 pawns, right? Semper Fi decided to spend this time where White's cleaning up their king, getting 2 extra pawns on the queen side. So any endgame is going to be more or less winning for Black. So Prophylaxis correctly says, let's keep pieces on the board. Let's keep some dynamism going. As long as the kings are exposed, either player could get randomly checkmated or tactics at any moment here in this game. Why are these tournaments rated, Chess in My Veins? Many reasons. The main reason is so players can get some sense of how good or bad they are from their tactic. Another reason is honestly just to teach people to stop worrying about their chess.com ratings. You shouldn't even really worry about your FIDE rating or your USCF rating, much less your chess.com rating. Okay, tactic alert. White puts the rook opposite this knight, and Black plays rook takes f3, greedily leaving the rook on an undefended square. White tries for queen tactic, hitting these 2 pieces. The rook looks like it's going to drop. There's a tricky move, f5, queen f3, and if pawn takes knight, queen f8. That said, my read was that, as Hockey Chess Dude is saying, queen g4 may have been better than rook takes d7. Queen g4, you threaten checkmate and the rook. I don't see how the rook gets back to defend the knight. And if black plays f5, you take a full extra rook. If pawn takes knight, this is still hanging because the knight's pinned. So that's checkmate. And you don't have to sack your rook for the knight. But let's follow the game. White goes for this tactic, gets the piece, black moves the queen, and now we get an insane endgame of knight against 3 pawns. This endgame is fine for black, by the way, which is why it was such a big deal whether white chose queen g4 or rook d7. Now, of course, white had seconds. So it's great that they even spotted that there was a tactic there, right? Because that could have saved the game for them. They were going to lose otherwise. So it's great that they spotted there was a tactic. Had they had a minute instead of 15 to 20 seconds, when they spot the tactic, they could look for different move orders. And that's sort of like a calculation trick, right? Is when you see a pattern, you say, like, I've got rook d7 and queen g4, then you always reverse that pattern. You say, what if I go queen g4 and then maybe rook d7? And switching move orders of your tactical moves is one of the main ways that you find tactical ideas during your games. Okay, so here black's successfully advancing the pawns, which means black's position is getting better. And I think that once this knight was facing this pawn here, white needed to prioritize improving the knight, bring it into attacking distance of the black king. But just giving checks does not quite cut it. Black improves their position with the pawns a little bit. This position should be an advantage for black, but it's not clear if it should be a win, draw, or lost. You know, it depends how well they play the endgame out. And Chess Gone Mad, I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to cover your beautiful sack. There's too much going on. All right, white improves the knight. Now there's some pressure on these pawns. Now black's got to be more honest with the defense of the king, right? So this is going to make the black queen get pretty passive here. An important detail is that against queen d4, you can trade the queen and then win the pawn on b4, which really helps white quite a bit. So black defends from d6 as necessary. 6 seconds for Professor. h3, little pawn move. Okay, just avoiding queen takes h2. Man, I was thinking king e2. I would have blundered that pawn with check, and then the queen gets back and defends this pawn. Ay, ay, ay. Black looks to advance these pawns. Now king e2. Yep, that's the move. Checks him. King's going to drop back. I think the king's going to head in this direction in general. King d1. So if black takes here, white's going to get this pawn and this pawn. So instead, black gives a few more checks. These are not helping black, by the way, these checks. What did black do? Advance the f pawn. Okay, that makes sense. Now white tries to throw a check. King b5. Is white going to keep checking, hoping it's perpetual? It does look like that should be a perpetual. White could try it. 0.1 seconds, though, and they flag. Okay, so this move would have been enough to get a draw here. The black king can't get away from this area here, and the queen can follow anywhere. This queen on g1 can't block these checks anymore, right? Well, not only that, if you walk away, I mean, white can go knight c5 and checkmate black. So you got to stay around here, right? And then white checks. And if the king ever comes here, oddly enough, they get checkmated by the knight. So they can't run around the pawns. So, intense finale here. White had the draw just in range with perpetual check, just 3 or 4 moves away, and they can't quite get the move off in time. That's the flag. Let's go back to stopped clock and DJ Creech. DJ Creech did get those 2 pieces against a rook with that rook takes h3 move. Now they got to play out this whole endgame here. Very little time. Both players low. Knight check, maybe move this bishop towards this pawn here. Okay, just positions the bishop in the middle for now. B3 or D7 looking to win this pawn would have been good as well. But one's moves can only be so good. The key here is to just keep making moves, you know. You don't want to lose on time. A randomish check from the knight. Black king retreats. That move would have been really good 1 or 2 moves ago. Gets rid of the A pawn. White's going to go rook A6 and collect Black's A pawn. And now White's got some chances that suddenly emerge as they win 2 black pawns on the queen side. Things get much tougher for Kraai. I'll just show you all, folks, real quick. It was actually important to just go after the pawn right away and leave the knight and king on the squares they are. Because here, it's actually Black who wins a pawn, not White. White can't take because of knight d5. That's why it's so important. We want to go straight after that A pawn. And this knight was better on b4 than on c2 because it could defend these pawns. Even in this position, Black could have still played bishop b3. White can't take because of knight d5. So, here we are. White wins that pawn, wins the knight as well. Oh my god. DJ Kraai just could not find the proper coordination of the knight and bishop in this endgame. And now White's got the outside passer and the rook versus minor piece and should be able to win unless it causes too much pressure for White to now suddenly be ahead instead of behind. Chess in My Veins asking, is it beneficial to play lots of rapid for classical chess improvement? I'm not sure how many games I should play a day for best improvement. Depends on how strong you are currently, Chess in My Veins. And stopped clock with the huge endgame comeback. You know, DJ Kraai actually, man, it was in time trouble the whole middle game. They had 30 seconds to play that entire middle game. They navigated all the complications of the middle game, no problem, with 30 seconds on the clock. But in the end game, the wheels came off, right? And we can clearly see, for some people, middle games are harder. For other people, it's end games, you know? So Kraai, in the middle game, knew how to keep all the pieces on defended squares, hold like a pawn structure, and somehow everything is natural for DJ Kraai in the middle game. Once you get into that end game, they weren't sure, you know, where to put the bishop and knight, how to coordinate them together on a more open board without the same structure that you have in the middle game. And I'm also somebody who spent most of my life basically without endgame instincts for where to put the pieces. And in the middle game, where most other people would say it was more complicated, there it was clear to me what to do much of the time. And then in the end game, like, I just don't know where to put the pieces. So yeah, definitely. This is the kind of end game which, if I were DJ Kraai, I might try replaying against a training partner at some further date. I'd set up the position around here, right? Beginning of the end game. I would just play this out a couple times as Black till I feel comfortable winning it, because this is a very, very winnable end game for Black. It's not just like a good position. It should be completely winning. And at this level, you know, it would be reasonable to have those kind of skills to be able to win it. So I think it would be worth the practice time. Okay, so now we're going to go to the 1700 plus section. Let me just make sure if I can answer Chess in My Veins level 1600 OTB. So you don't need to play much rapid chess anymore, Chess in My Veins, to improve. Rapid chess is going to have minimal improvement for you unless it's part of specific training. For example, these players are at a similar level to you maybe, right? If you had played this endgame here as Black as DJ Kraai, you could play some rapid or blitz games to spar this endgame, right? To repeat the endgame a few times till you get better at a specific piece of knowledge. And because you want to get better at it, you want to play multiple games in this same endgame. And because playing multiple classical games takes a long time, you would practice this endgame at a time control between 5 and 15 minutes. So that would be a reason to play some rapid games on a day. But just sitting there and playing random full games without a training plan associated with it, full rapid games, is not going to be of much use to your level. You have to have like a plan and something you're working on. You could come in and play a tournament once a week like we do here, and you could get something from that tournament. It could be kind of like a checkup on some of your skills and, you know, how quickly and how well are you seeing the board? How are your middle game positional instincts? But this is not really where you get better for your OTB chess game when you're 1600 USCF like you are. It's almost all got to be sort of targeted training by this point. You know? So, yeah. Hopefully that gives you an answer. We can maybe discuss it a little bit more if that wasn't satisfying, but I'm going to open up a game for the 1700 plus group now. So let's get into the top section for a game here. All right, and let's see what games we got going here. We got a game somebody asked me about before, Blunderfest and Real Logic, what the eval is here. This is an isolated queen pawn for white with some real attacking chances on the king side where black's made a couple pawn moves, but they do have the fianchetto bishop and knight f6, so they do have some defensive resources. And because this pawn's on b3, there's some looseness on the c file, which is definitely a good potential source of counterplay. I would say the position looks pretty balanced at first blush. Yeah. It's my first thought here. Let's open up some other games. Somebody recommends Jack's game with Lone Alpaca. Oh, Jack's playing the fantasy variation against the Caro. Wow, 600 is a huge difference, stop clock, yeah. Okay, they're only at move 5. We might as well go back to move 3. Queen b6. It's a slightly weird move, but when white doesn't have knight f3, white's weak on d4 and e5 a little bit. So in this kind of fantasy Caro position where there's this tension between these pawns, this move here prepares to play this idea e5, pawn takes e5, bishop to c5. So if white played the wrong move to some extent, I don't know exactly what move would be the wrong move, but I don't know, let's say I played knight e2 for white. Maybe that would even allow e5, pawn takes e5, bishop c5. And white's just instantly a little bit weak on this diagonal. Looks like the king's going to be sent for a walk, right? Yeah, it's good that you know that about your self-stop clock. And so if you play slower time controls, you can compensate for that particular weakness. And the faster the time control, the less there's anything you can do about it. Yeah. Okay, so queen b6, knight c3. And I think partly the move knight c3 could allow you to answer e5 with a very complicated variation like this, knight a4. And then if the bishop comes in with check, you come here and the queen's still attacked, right? If black goes queen a5, c3, the queen defends this knight. Bishop g1, rook g1, b5 trying to trap the piece, knight c5 slipping away, b4, bishop e3, and white's good. I don't know all the details, but, most solid developing moves won't fall into this e5 thing, but we have to be aware of it. So knight c3, so now black plays the more restrained e6, just holding their structure, but a small victory for white there is just that this bishop is not coming out, which is something. If somebody plays the Caro, they basically like French structures, but they don't like the French bishop, right? So if you get them to keep the bishop on c8, they're generally not pumped about it. It is a small little victory when we get to do this. And we've got Carl cheering for the fantasy variation. Right on, Carl. Yay for the fantasy. e6. Bishop e2. Yeah, so this is not a move that Jack is going to be happy playing, and Jack spent a minute and a half before settling for this move. That's not a fun move. It's not a great square for the piece. The piece wants to be on d3, but Jack doesn't go to d3 because of queen d4 here. You know, he could consider it. He could say that's 3 tempi, right? 3 minor pieces. But the question for Jack is, how do you castle to continue your initiative here, right? And how do you develop this bishop? And you also can't really break the center because black's really solid. So it doesn't feel like an exciting, you know, you just don't have that awesome gambiting feel. I think that one of the moves that sometimes gets played here is a4, trying to play a5 to get the queen off of b6. That's how annoying she actually is on this square in this particular variation. Around noon. And you know, black could play a5 to keep her there. And then I don't know what white does next with that information. What else might I recommend for white? Because obviously Jack was sort of like stuck in a weird spot here and didn't know what to do. I've been stuck in this spot too, but I'm not sure I necessarily know what to do. Chess in my veins. Yeah, the Chess Dojo website. And I'll give you more advice on stream as well. Let me just get a little further into Jack and Lonely Alpaca's game here. But, you know, the Chess Dojo training program has, for every level, it has sparring positions for the middle game and the end game, and it also has a system for how you learn openings that involves sparring positions. I can show you in a little bit. I feel like you've been around for a while and you would know that. No? Is this news to you? Okay. What else might I like to do? I might like to play bishop e3. Give black this. Now I gotta save my knight. Knight e2. Bishop here. I can't use the queen because I'll hang my rook. Feels weird to sack a pawn and then retreat, but I do have a good center. They've moved their queen a bunch, and they don't want to trade this bishop. Like, they used it tactically to bother me, but if they trade the bishop, oh, it's amazing for me, right? See these dark squares? So if they trade the bishop, they're going to be busted. They're going to have to bring this bishop back at some point, right? And I'm ready to play rook b1, rook b3 here. Maybe this could be okay, Jack, / other players like Carl Milton, sorry. Carl Milton, your name always makes me think of Kamil Miton, a Polish grandmaster. And that's the first time that my mouth has made that slip, but Carl Milton is close enough to Kamil Miton. You can see the heavy overlap in letters. Was a Polish prodigy and then grandmaster and professional player. Whose games I studied when I was learning chess early on. Okay, but so for players like Jack and Carl and any other fantasy players out there, this bishop e3 allowing queen b2 looks pretty plausible to me here, right? Queen b2, and I develop a piece. So first of all, I've got 3 pieces of development of minor pieces versus the queen. I'm going to get rook b1 with tempo, right? With an open file. And I've got a super center. So if I look at this, I feel like all the factors are there for this to be plausible for white. And then the move I would worry about is bishop b4. And I hate retreating. But actually, once I play this move, I'm not so pessimistic about that retreat. This looks totally reasonable to me, actually. And in fact, black needs to be very careful. If they play knight e7, white even has this move a3. A fancy tactical detail, if bishop a3, rook b1 traps the queen. I blocked her escape square with that pawn. I don't know what we call that in chess, but I'm filling in the square, right? I'm filling in the square. I deflect the bishop and then I trap it. This is like typical in Go when you're trying to capture a group of stones. You sometimes throw stones into squares sacrificially, but then when they take it, they've filled in too many of their own squares. Here we're kind of getting the bishop to fill in the queen's free square. And at the same time, if the bishop retreats, knight a4 is a famous queen trap. Taking away b6. Oh, but the bishop's blocked by this knight. Maybe they can still sail away. Oh, they do get away. It doesn't look like they should. They do sort of get away. I think I can win here anyway, though. It's not a queen win, but I'm going to play e5, force this piece with limited squares to a bad square. Then I'm going to hit him with knight b5, force feeding the knight on a4, and boom, I get the dark squares plus a rook. So for those who don't believe that the dark squares are enough compensation for a pawn here, which they are, if I didn't have this rook, I would still be good here as white, by the way, just off the dark squares. But for those who don't believe that, I'm sure you all believe in the power of a rook. So this a3 move is nice. I feel like already here, black needs to start bailing out of here, you know, maybe queen a3 instead of knight e7 to start getting out. Then rook b1, bishop back to e7 or something. Oh no, but like they just can't get out in good time, right? This allows knight d5, queen here, knight f4, where are you going? Oh man. No, it's very hard to extricate these two pieces. After bishop b4, both of these pieces are then unhappy with where they are. Ay, ay, ay. Yeah, Skibix had just moved from Venezuela to the Netherlands, I think, when the lockdown happened. That must have been a very interesting experience. It's one thing to like go to a new country, right? That's already a very foreign experience. And then the lockdown was a very foreign experience for almost everybody who participated in locking down. Even if you didn't lock down, I guess everybody else being locked down would have changed the world outside, I imagine. So yeah, what an experience. So this looks very plausible, actually, this bishop e3 move. And, you know, black could try e5, saying the bishop's undefended. But personally, I just don't believe stuff like that. You can't bring out your queen and then make 3 or 4 pawn moves when white's got more minor pieces out than you. You know? I just very simply don't believe in it. And honestly, if white plays pawn takes pawn, it looks like black might even be losing a pawn. But my first instinct was to, you know, develop another piece and say, what are you doing? Like, explode it all, please. My pieces will emerge. So, yeah, I think this move looks pretty interesting, bishop e3. All right, let's see how their game actually goes. Bishop e2, knight f6, knight h3, bishop b4, knight f2 supporting this pawn. Jack is very reluctant to play e5 and grab the sort of French advanced structure. But as soon as the knight's on f6, e5 is always playable for white. Gets castled. Look at that. We had a knight had to come out to h3 because of this pawn, and this knight had to come out to a6 because of the opposite pawn, right? That kind of symmetry around the side. Knight a4, c3, bishop e7, b4 is going to be good for white. White's grabbing all the space. Jack's on the move. He hits black with a series of precise little moves and grabs a beautiful little space advantage for white. So this opening's probably turning out good for white. I think f4 makes sense here. It's not the only move. You know, bishop e3 looks good as well, developing a piece. Bishop d3, Jack's going to focus on checkmate. There's a few different ways you could play from here. You could recognize that black's main idea is b6, c5, and you could try to prophylaxis against that here, right? Which could be like developing the bishop to fight for that square and then maybe preparing rook c1 or rook b1. Maybe somehow you could prevent black from playing c5. If you prevent c5, basically you know you'll eventually checkmate their king. Like if they can't play c5, they've got no game. So that's why part of me would think prophylactically. Jack goes bishop d3. So I think he's going to prioritize like queen c2 and just making a weakness immediately, forcing black to do something on the abandoned king side. And black says, yeah, I got to fight for space on the king side. f5. Now big choice for white. Do you take en passant or do you engage with g4 and leave your space advantage to cramp their pieces? My instinct is like g4. Rar. Let's keep that e5 pawn and go for kingside attack. Anybody else out there have like very strong instincts about after f5 whether you want to play g4, trade en passant, or some third approach that is not even in my top 2 instincts? I totally subscribe to Hockey Chess Dude's comment about this position. He says, white looks amazing at the moment. I could still lose it with both colors, though. Yes. One of the things to know about positions that are sort of positionally amazing, there's nothing locked in about who's going to win or lose the game. White's position is great, but it is so far away from winning a chess game. It's not like white's sitting here with an extra rook or anything like that. You know, not even a full bind. It's just a very nice position that a GM, like if you gave, you know, somebody like Fabi this position, he could maybe make you feel like you never had a chance to get your pieces out and like you were kind of crushed from this moment till the end of the game. But very few people are really going to do that to you. Most games at some point, you know, first there's going to be a maneuvering phase. Does white handle that correctly, right? Then black's going to have chances to either break with c5 or f6. Is white going to handle those decisions correctly? Then you're going to have a tactical phase. Is white going to calculate all that correctly? There's, you know, a full game of chess to be played at this point. We should definitely not be in the habit of counting advantages and disadvantages and points this early in the game. So Jack just plays a tame bishop d2, coordinating the position. Reasonable. So he did not take the chance to en passant, which would have given black some space back, but weakened the e file. And so I think his plan will eventually be g4, but he's just developing more first. Totally reasonable. It's Demola feels like my g4 idea is risky. Yeah, chess is risky. It's Demola. You got to risk it for the biscuit. You got to take some risks to win the game. It's riskier for black because they've got like no pieces on the king side. But I agree, it's not, you know, easy or smooth sailing. Okay, so Foos says, you know, instinct is to make this trade to weaken the e file, but white can't prevent e5. Is there something wrong with f4 here, Foos? Normally f4 would prevent e5 here. The bishop's defending the pawn, so that I haven't hung the pawn. And a move that's coming really soon that's actually very nice is knight g4. To some extent, in these positions, you can even consider knight g4 with the idea that if they go e5, you take here and just grab that dark squared bishop. Now, I would say even with the dark squared bishop, this is going to be a little bit controversial because the knight's weird and black has the center. But probably white's a little bit better even in this position, just off the dark squared bishop. Right? What do I need to do? I guess I need to play rook e1, move the queen away somewhere, right? And then get my bishop to d4. And once my bishop's on d4, actually, it starts to become a little more obvious that white is better. That said, the lockdown makes sense. You prevent e5, and next we're coming with knight to g4, or maybe even queen h5 first, followed by knight g4. That actually looks very good for white. Why was this not my first instinct? Maybe it should have been. Maybe it should have been, because now this is looking wretched for black to me. Right, I hate giving black space. I hate giving black space. You know, as long as I had this pawn on e5, I thought I'm eventually going to checkmate this king. But now that I look at it, This take looks pretty good. Could black do this weird move? That's the only move that forces e5, right? Then we go here, here, queen h5, e4. Now black's got too much space. Trade. Should I sack my bishop before it gets locked out? How plausible is this feeling to folks? I am thirsty chess in my veins. I got my water here. Spills it on himself. Does this feel 90% chance that we're mating? 10% chance? Is this desperation? Is this genius? How does it feel? I've got a calibration. I'm just curious to give you all a chance to compare yours with mine. You know, and if I ask the question and pause for a moment, then some people actually, you know, think about it. And then when we compare answers, it's all interesting. Fu says queen g6 last move. At first I thought this was kind of desperate. This was not my first thought to sack the bishop. As you saw, my first question was, you know, oh, can I go queen h5? If I trade twice, they're going to get their queen out here. But as soon as I actually as soon as I put this like actually on the board, I was like, wait, it's like 100% chance that white wins. e4 blocking out the bishop. I felt like white had no attack. We sacked the bishop first. I feel like there's no defense at all. Like just dead. Just dead. You know, king g7, bishop h6 check only makes things worse because my bishop's going to h6 anyway, right? So king comes here. As Fu says, we could throw this in if we want before we go bishop h6. I don't know that it matters. I don't care too much. I feel pretty comfortable with this move. Part of my point with this move order is that then if they do, I don't even know what they do. But I was thinking maybe if there was some rook move, I could then play knight g4 and then trade rooks. And like every piece would come, you know? Like even this move here. And this is silly because queen g6 check wins the game. But I was thinking, you know, rook f7, knight g4, right? And then here, and it's just so obvious that white has 4 pieces against none. So this, actually, we shouldn't even have to calculate. Once we conceive of the idea, we should know white's winning. And one thing that can help, folks, is if you see that you've got at least a perpetual check, you don't need to be afraid. But you may also just have like a sense that you feel like, oh my God, it's just there's nobody. There's nobody to cover him. So I don't know. This e takes f, f4 is looking crushing for white. e5 loses on the spot to bishop h7 and checkmate. So there's no e5. And if they do this, this is the best of all worlds for white. The e file's weak and the king is weak. So this is gorgeous. So okay, maybe ef6 was even better than my instinct to keep it closed and play g4. It looks like Jack's playing for bishop g5, weakening the dark squares with this queen c1 move. The players are thinking long and hard here. Black spent 5 minutes on b6. Normally, the way you save these kind of positions as black, if black's position's bad, which it probably is, right? Normally, the way you save it is you just play the moves you have to play really quickly. Put the pressure on white to find the hard moves. How does white checkmate you? Make white get low on time. That's the way you save these positions. You have to play quickly. You have to play quickly in these cases. I think. Just an idea. I don't normally advocate playing really quickly, but that's my feeling here. The way these go is like, you're like, yeah, I can't quite defend. You know, there's not some genius maneuver I'm going to come up with by thinking for days. I'm going to break with c5 as soon as I can. Hope that white doesn't find a checkmate in time and have some time to calculate when the tactics come. So b6, c5. Jack is brilliant. Raise the curve. He is brilliant. Here he's thinking 3 minutes each. Definitely they're not going to have enough time to calculate everything that's going to happen this game. Because this game, you can see it still hasn't reached its apex, right? It hasn't reached its climax. There's going to be a tactical phase here where the pieces are going to come in contact, right? Yeah, so Jack's idea with Queen C1 was to weaken those dark squares. He thinks for a minute, and I think correctly trades the B pawn so as to not sack a pawn, right? So after C5, this was Jack's plan in general. I'm not saying he meant to do it in this move order, but what he was thinking about was, do I want to do it like this and give this pawn, right? And the answer is no. Why let the knight off of A6 and kill a pawn and counterplay and harassment of my pieces, right? So Jack trades once with the B pawn. The reason you would hesitate for a moment and not just do this obviously, so to speak, is because this move opens up the queen side more. And Jack wants the king side open and the queen side closed, right? So it is a conflict between principles, right? Anyway, I think he makes the right choice. Then goes here. Gets the dark squares. But he's going to need to find a mechanism to increase the pressure on black even more here, right? He needs some attacking mechanism. Maybe he's just going to go queen e7 and just mess black's whole position up just with the queen. But normally I would think, you know, he needs to make some kind of threat on one of these squares, right? So knight h3, knight f4, knight h5, or g4, or knight to g4. Like something really intense is going to be needed. Okay. Black goes after the bad knight on a4. If it retreats, there's going to be queen c3. This is a huge moment for Jack, right? And this is the kind of moment where if I'm lone alpaca, I want to play b6, c5 just kind of instantly, just like I got to. And then I want to have the time here to find queen a5. Okay, alpaca still had the time to find it, but I want to have a big time lead here, right? Like they've got a better position, but I've got, 7 minutes against 1, and then I find queen a5, I hit them with it, and they're hesitating, and they're like, oh God, can I sack a knight? Can I sack a pawn? That's my rescue scenario for black. Jack could be looking at knight b2, bishop c2, queen e7. I think bishop c2 is also the best guess, Hockey Chess Dude. I'm with you on that. Jack's just played a move, bishop c2, and they each spent 1 minute on that trade of moves. So now they've got 2 minutes each left. So very soon they're going to be playing the entire game in less time than they've been spending on single moves up till this point. Pawn trade. Gonna have to recapture that a little bit faster, Jackie. Oh, this is about to be a nerve-wracking disaster. And I know from talking to Jack about some game he played in a previous rapid tournament where he played great, I know that he does feel nerves because he felt nerves even during a great game where he played wonderfully and the game went really well for him. So I know this is going to be nervy, probably for both players. They're going to be feeling their nerves at this phase of the game. The bishop's kind of got to go to b3 to keep that knight defended. And Raise the Curve says white's got to abandon the kingside dreams. It sort of makes sense that the rooks would gravitate towards over here, right? Raise the Curve. 2 full open files. The one thing about the kingside dream that's not fully forgotten, though, Raise the Curve, is I think queen e7 is like a major weak spot in black's game. So the queen actually is going to be able to coordinate with her pieces from this side of the board. Jack could also be looking at queen d2, by the way. Maybe that's why he stopped for a minute here on what should be a simple move. And he does play it, yeah. So that is awkward for black. He's preparing to play like a3, right? So now black's got to sort out these pieces, make sure that knight c6 is solid. But yeah, I think that Raise the Curve, the basic look, if we didn't have this queen d2 move come in, the basic look is you're going bishop b3, rook c1, queen e7, and moving this knight to f4 through either d3 or h3, right? Preferably d3 because it covers more other squares, but depends if that hangs the knight or not. But I think queen e7 was actually going to be pretty annoying for black in many cases. So I think the idea of queen c1 and bishop g5 trading dark squared bishops was
A pretty good positional idea from Jack. Oh, now they're getting so low. Under a minute. And retreats going for the trade, going into the end game. And now it's going to be who gets control of these open files first. The key things, I think white should have the upper hand, but it's going to be tricky because this d-pawn is going to be super weak in many cases, right? The key is going to be, does white get at e6 with this knight on f4 or c5 or this knight? And does white get a rook to c7? Those are going to be kind of deciding factors right here. Rook b1. So now knight c6 is going to hit d4. It happens really fast, and then you can start getting tied up. Bishop a6 looking to coordinate the rooks, and Jack has not yet really taken into account how big a deal d4 is going to be, because he does not play rook d1, he plays rook c1. So he's still thinking like rooks battle, he's thinking a little generally. He hasn't yet spotted that this is potentially going to be an issue, and it won't be. Nobody will spot that it's going to be an issue. Black goes to this outpost, big mistake. Sometimes it's more important to attack things than to be on the best squares. Jack retreats, no. This knight had great dreams here. Great dreams were possible. All right, this knight gets harassed. It's an all-out skibbity-bop-boop battle here. Oh, man, low time for both players. Position's probably about equal right now. Probably about equal at the moment. We've got Chess Gone Mad preferring black. And that's a very strong player voting for black. But I feel like it's more of just kind of an anyone's game kind of situation. Like the position's very close to equal, or any little mistake in time trouble or somebody hesitating and flagging is really going to be deciding. Jack tries to get the knight to f4 to start tying black to that, but knight f4, king f7 is okay for black for the moment. It's not as big a deal as knight c6 was before, when he had no convenient way to defend it. Black prepares g5 in advance, so it's going to be king f7, and then, what do you play as white? h4, or just let black play g5 and then go knight h5, king f2. Yeah, so just lets g5 happen. And will Alpaca pull the trigger? And who? They probably both have hands shaking right now. Who is going to come through under pressure here? No way to know. No way to know. Oscar also likes black, so most people are preferring black a little bit here, partly because of the perpetual weakness on d4, but Pruess's take, for what it's worth, is that the position's about equal, so we probably won't figure out anything like the objective evaluation in a 20-second blitz off, but that's what I'm feeling. I like this g4 move from Jack. That makes e6 more sensitive. And black says, I don't want one outpost, I want two outposts, and threatens rook c3, knight e4 tactically. So the next move, Jack's got to be very careful. Oh, and threatens knight takes rook. This looks like maybe a winning move. Rook c3 comes in. Yeah, it's a winning move. There we go. There may have been one saving move after knight d2, the very weird knight to b5. With the idea of knight b1, knight d6. With the idea of bishop takes b5, rook c8, and then rook takes b5. It's probably all bad for white, honestly. Black gets two pieces, and Jack gets the base pawn. It's actually going to be mildly annoying for black, even though it's not enough. You'll see how big a deal this pawn hanging is. So you see there's this like knight g7, knight e6 pattern, but black does have rook b7 saving things, and cool under pressure, Lone Alpaca finds it, so that's going to be enough to win the game, I believe. Knight check. King gets away. King go bingo. And black's got two extra pieces to mop up with. Knight d2 was a beautiful, powerful move. King f2 apparently was the wrong square. Yeah. Yeah, he's quite a good player, Chris. But Lone Alpaca looks very cool and collected under time pressure here. Proof black was better. Maybe so. Maybe so. Keeps rooks on the board, keeps a prayer on the board, but Lone Alpaca has been able to play pretty quickly and increase their time from 20 seconds up to 50. So they should be good to go for cleaning up and wrapping up this game without any major mistakes. I think this should be quite a clean conversion, should be possible. They were thinking about like rook a2, rook f1 with a perpetual here, and decided they didn't need the a-pawn that badly and kept the f-file. Keeping the rook out of an open file. Goes back to c1. Maybe now bishop c4 to block all the files. Black's using like one minor piece per file to keep this rook out of the game, but they've got enough minor pieces to do it. and shall I say, they've got enough extra minor pieces to do it. They're able to keep the white rook out of the game. Knight d3, good move. Bringing that knight off of a4, yeah. Yeah, Alpaca, that's how it's done. Beautiful work. And just kind of zugzwanging Jack, taking every single space till Jack can't even find any piece to move. Yes, Hockey Chess Dude, this can happen definitely up to my level, definitely up to IM level. Maybe even some GMs could have this sort of thing happen to them where you've got a nice position, but your opponent just hangs on, you get low on time, you never find a breakthrough. Definitely. Lone Alpaca makes a pass pawn, which is the main ingredient for winning any endgame in chess, basically. Jack threatens e6. Resourceful. Resourceful. But I guess bishop c6 is good enough here, huh? And I'm expecting Alpaca to keep finding good moves. Yep, bishop c6. We got to give another exclam to Alpaca's account. One of the biggest mistakes that White made, Hockey Chess Dude, Raised the Curve, and others, was bringing the knight from a4 to c3. That is also where White lost to rook takes c3, was on that unprotected knight on c3. But that knight on a4 needed to be going to c5 at some point, or at least sitting on a4 with the possibility of going to c5. On c3, it didn't attack anything, and it was merely a target. It wasn't on a square defended by a pawn. It wasn't on a square where it attacked anything. So that was like the major mistake for Jack in the endgame, I think. Black sacks a piece to get a new queen. And if Jack's pawn were already on g6, this would be winning. This rook b8. That's how close it was, right? If he'd had time for, g6 rook move somewhere. Got 15 seconds, throwing the checks he's got. But that is going to be the end, and we can definitely say for Lone Alpaca, they were very cool in this time scramble, right? Very cool under pressure here. All right, GG's all around. And now we're going to swing back around and come back up through the under 1300 section, have a look at some games over there. So, under 1300, copy that link, come over here. See what we got going on here. I'm going to check the standings for a second. In first place are Azazel and Emo at the moment, with 3 games played and 3 games won. We are halfway through the arena. Halfway through the arena, an hour and a half left to play. We've got here entire pigeon with an extra knight. And over here, an opening. So yeah, let's catch this game from the beginning. Why Suleiman versus Azazel, who is in first place in the tournament. There's a tiny little number 1 here next to their picture and name. So that shows that they're currently in first place in the tournament. So White's got this fianchettoed bishop. Black's countering it with this one and a pretty strong pawn on d5. Now Black grabs extra space on the queen side and White supports their center. I actually kind of like the Black position a little bit here. The potential to be the first person with play over here, although I guess if we ever take, then White's rook is pretty good, right? So I'm not pumped about that. But I do love having this pawn involved while this one's blocked. And I also wonder if we could maybe go knight h5 and grab the bishop pair. It wouldn't be a huge advantage for Black, but I would probably do it. I do like my bishops. Probably go grab a bishop pair, all else being equal. But nothing clear. Nothing clear to it yet. What would my plan be for White? If I switch perspectives, my eye first goes to Black because I kind of like Black's setup is more like the kind of setup that I often play. If I switch to White's side, what might I do as White? Maybe knight e5, maybe knight b5 to get the c pawn going. Knight b5 hitting these squares. Oh, I like that. That actually could make sense for White next move. I wonder if we could just play knight b5 without even playing e3. Come to think of it. Knight b5. Pawn takes. Because knight c7, rook c8 doesn't really do anything. So then my center gets kind of taken apart by Black. Yeah, okay, I would play e3, just like Y Suleiman did. But next, I'm going knight b5, if you let me, I think. Yeah, it's hard to know how to proceed from either side, raise the curve. I would say there's like two options. One is you go a6 and b5, taking more space here on the queen side. Right? Because the worst thing about White's position is this knight is a little bit awkward, right? It can't go anywhere except actually I want to go to b5. And it's blocking the c pawn. So c2 and b2 are just kind of stuck here. I can't contest space as White. So as Black, a6, b5, taking more space and exploiting that knight is one of the two things you could do. The second thing you're allowed to do is you could just go knight h5 and trade off this bishop. You know, just put the bishop, just bank the bishop pair and then keep playing from there. So, two options. Yes, Damon, this position with the pawn on c4 would be completely different. Lots of us play that position with the pawn on c4, right? Then your bishop's got some real pressure. You can go knight e5 and the pawn on d5 can't take because of pressure on the diagonal and you really ramp up your pressure. So with your pawn on c4, you'd be really good. With the pawn on c2, I like Black a little bit. Chess Gone Mad points out that even if White gets knight b5, knight e8 might be perfectly okay for Black. But I would still do that, you know. I would go knight b5, and if knight e8, maybe c3, maybe c4, but at least I get the c pawn into the game. Okay, Black has made a choice. Let's see what it was. Knight h5. Going for that bishop pair. Yeah. Looks good. Makes sense. It was on the to-do list. Take that bishop pair. Will blunder something like this. This plan here is a good plan. It's one of the first two plans I'd look at. Or are you saying you want to move this bishop here as Black? That's possible, but not as good, because this is potentially an important piece for black. Raise the curve. Taking on f4 is perfectly good for black. You don't have to be scared of king h1 and rook g1. Do not fear. You can also delay when you take on f4. You can play both plans, right? Like if your opponent plays king h1 here. White played knight e5, by the way, which makes sense for sure. If your opponent plays king h1, you can also do this queenside plan, right? Rook g1, you just keep doing this, right? Looks fine for black. So I would say it's fine if you prefer a6, b5. That might be the best plan. I don't know. But I just want to tell you, I think your evaluation of being scared of this g takes f4 is a mild misevaluation. I think black should be fine in those positions. It should not be dangerous. Both positions should be fine for black. And Chess Gone Mad wants to play g5 to try and win the bishop, but yeah. Maybe. Nice stretch. Okay, knight e5. The knight on h5 is attacked by the queen, so black's just got to kind of go forward with the trading plan, right? Take on f4. And then it's going to be logical to trade on d4 as well next. Why is it logical to trade on d4 next? Because basically you want to open up diagonals for this dark squared bishop as soon as you can. So whether white takes with the e-pawn or the g-pawn, trading on d4 is what's going to go with this knight h5, knight f4 plan the best. White's hesitating on the recapture here, oddly. ef4 keeps your king position the safest, but it weakens this diagonal. That's a very central diagonal. It's going to be tough to handle. gf4 is a little bit more imbalanced and gives you rook g1 for shots at the black king. It's hard to say which one's better. Honestly, it's a little bit of a matter of taste. Oh, white goes in for some calculation. What? Black checks and goes for this. I think black's going to be up a piece with this sequence, right? If both knights get captured, black's got an extra piece. Knight f8, knight e1. There's no way out for either knight. Yeah, black's going to have an extra piece now. White overthought themselves here after knight f4 and got too fancy. Just got to recapture. Overthought themselves. Now they're going to be down a piece here. The rooks fall as well. And now the knights are both trapped, and black will emerge with the extra bishop. The arenas have another hour and 26 minutes. So plenty of time to play another 2 or 3 games for anybody who wants to play a little bit. I'm thinking about a suggestion from Chess Gone Mad of black playing knight e8 early on here, with the idea of trying to trap this bishop because it's got no retreats from the get-go. I'd be a little bit surprised if you could fully trap this piece, right? I mean, for one thing, white could play e4 or g4 or something. In fact, e4 makes a lot of sense, right? With the knights just coming to d4 and e4, that's an immediate refutation, actually, of knight e8. I was going to suggest something else, Chess Gone Mad, because I was in such a slow structural way of thinking. I was going to say, like, h4 makes it very hard for black to achieve g5. And this is sort of like a normal pawn structure to kind of at least keep the piece alive, even though black can always trade it with a knight. But now that I ask myself about e4, it's like, oh, well, that's an obvious refutation. That makes knight e8 look terrible, right? Suddenly white really looks like white, like they've got a normal opening advantage. It looks like we're looking at, a Sicilian or a French or a Caro or something, and white's got that little advantage. You got to play against 2 grandmasters yesterday? That's very exciting. Okay, so here white went for queen h5. Black takes the knight. White takes the knight. Trades. So yeah, basic. You can play very simply once you're up a piece, It doesn't have to be the very best move, just simple stuff, right? Trading opens a file for the rook. We're going to be able to go after these squares here with bishop b4 if we need to. Black just goes bishop b4 immediately before rook c8, ensuring a trade. I guess if you go rook c8, in theory, white could move the knight away and just give you everything and keep a knight on the board. But of course, that'll be easy for black as well. So it's just 2 different flavors. So bishop b4, forcing that trade. Probably see rook e3 or queen f3 here to avoid doubled pawns. Four blitz games against Joe and a rapid game against Dlugi. And funny you should say that playing against Joe felt like playing against Stockfish, given that Dlugi is the one who's a known cheater. That's funny. And against Dlugi, it felt like a human. He didn't need to pull out an engine to beat down. And we get rook e3 and the trade. And I would say rook c8 looks pretty logical next. Rook c8. Very clean, simple play from Azazel. That's inspiring confidence in us, right? It feels like they know what to do to win the game, right? Just keep putting their pieces, contesting, make an open space on the board, then contest the open space with your pieces. If your opponent contests it, just keep trading. If they don't, you'll take over that space eventually. So here, I would think rook c3, queen c8, exact same approach as before. And still using their time. Very good, Azazel. One thing is, I love that you're taking some time. You also need to be aware anytime you get into an endgame, suddenly it's an issue that your king's back rank mated. So you should look for a moment where you can do something like this or double check every move you play. Nordovic has surged to second place without playing a single game. That's impressive. Yeah, so here, you want to play a move like queen c2 when they abandon the file, but we have to worry about queen a7 and queen e7 quite seriously, especially with our king as it is. So maybe a5 to keep pawns on the board. Maybe h6. Maybe h5. Nordovic's making it sound easy to win a tournament, huh? Hockey Chess Dude, making it seem easy. Love it. Azazel taking their time here. Wow. Dramatic move. Sacrificing a pawn, 2 different pawns, with the idea of trying to get this guy alive. Trying to get that extra piece alive. Nordovic no longer believes that chess is hard. It's a pretty good quote on its own right, Nordovic. I no longer believe that chess is hard, quote. Tradovich. Oh, the queen 2 steps her way to a7. Now, I mean, black could play d3, pawn takes d3, d4 if they're really on that get the bishop out train. Queen c7 to protect this pawn. Or move this pawn so you're no longer back rank mated. Various candidates. But Azazel definitely needing the time to make the choices. Great choice there. I like that one. Now white collects this pawn and goes after this one. Black is going to have to be careful because now white's got 2 connected passers to work with. Look at that. D3. Queen d4 blocking the bishop, but this pawn can take. I mean, it's one thing for us to be all spiffy about piece activity and loose with our pawn sacks and get the feeling, but I mean, you can't just let your opponent queen this pawn with check. I mean, things can still capture. Ay, ay, ay. This d3 move is a great move, I think, because after pawn takes, black can then play d4, opening up this bishop. And now you're threatening queen c1 back rank mate, among other things, you know? So, I mean, this was like a great idea, this d3 pawn sack, and white understood black's idea and said, I'm going to prevent it. I understand this bishop getting out's a big deal. I'm not materialistic. I'm not about the pawns, but I mean, you have to also be materialist because pawn takes pawn, c1 queen, that's going to end a game instantaneously. All right. Let's head to the deer middle section. May feel like it's not as special as the top section or the bottom section, but see what we got here in terms of games in the middle section. We got Nordovic against Emergens. Yeah, that looks like an interesting game right at the start. Bishop e6, solidifying this point. Perfect. Let's quickly check out the Berlin Ruy Lopez they got here. So this is the Berlin defense of the Ruy Lopez, as popularized by Vladimir Kramnik 25 years ago. Castles, grabs, here, retreats, takes, knight e5, bishop e7. So black's pawn structure is slightly hurt, but they've got the bishop pair. And this bishop, the unopposed light-scored bishop, looks like a pretty good piece. So I'd feel pretty comfortable as black here. Nordovic has got sort of 2 main options that I can see. One is you just clump a bunch of stuff in the center and say, hey, my knights are in good squares too. Like anything could happen. The other is you start lifting stuff and, you know, try to use the position of the queen here to just create threats and force the game into sort of attacking character. Thorbiddle says Nordovic's games often become interesting. I would even say Nordovic's games are maybe even always interesting. Like even when Nordovic, you know, wins or loses a rook, the game stays interesting. Roshan Deep, you want to do Grunfeld specific puzzles? Is that? Or is the puzzle separate from the Grunfeld? Question. All right. Black says, enough of this knight in my face. By the way, folks, you saw Nordovik's choice, right? Nordovik has a varied style. I wouldn't say he's like, a bloodthirsty lunatic who just always tries to checkmate regardless of the position. But he does have an aggressive streak in him. He does sometimes look for attacks, which is perfectly fine and a good thing, But this is definitely like not a huge surprise that Nordovik would think, yeah, maybe I could get something going here. He's got a feel for those ideas. And knight f5, by the way, would have been dramatic. I don't know like how much the players calculated this in a rapid game, but the d pawn's hanging, the knight hits the rook, we go for checkmate. That would have been a pretty feisty variation. Black goes for f6, trying to deal with white's best placed piece immediately before the pressure builds up anymore. And any pawn move in front of your king you have to be a bit careful of, especially when your opponent's pieces are near your king. But then additionally, we always have to ask about color complexes, right? So putting the pawns on dark squares is going to weaken your light squares. Black's the only player with a light squared bishop, so this is perfectly justified and reasonable. There's a good chance that the weaknesses won't be a problem. If the knight retreats, it did. Black's bishop can cover some of these weaknesses around the f6 pawn and make them less of a weakness. So Nordovik keeps the knight as close as possible to the king. If he went to the more normal square f3 defending his pawn, his knight is dominated by that f6 pawn, so it needs more moves. Like you move it here, and then the next thing you need to do is move it somewhere else. That's not brilliant. So if you're looking for kingside tactics and chances, this is the move for you. The alternative is really knight d3 going to c5. That's a reasonable positional spot for the knight. But there's definitely a question, does black have this knight f5 tactic now? No, they don't. They've weakened the light squares. Rook here. If rook takes, queen takes, that's two pieces. And if g6 defending the knight, Nordovik would definitely have spotted rook takes e6 and rook takes e8. Hitting the queen after all the trades, white will be ahead a piece now. Woo! So knight d3 was an alternative. Nordovik goes in the kingside direction. Bishop f7, trying to back that queen up. And black wants to trade off at least one rook before this rook ends up over here, right? That makes sense. Queen backs up. And Emergence is playing too quickly. I mean, 15 minutes left out of 15 minutes. Nordovik is doing real stuff. You got to take Nordovik seriously. You can't take him for granted. You can't be playing around like Nordovik's got no ideas behind his moves. You can't just answer everything this fast, Emergence. But as Emergence decides to think for the first time, we'll try and give Roshan Deep an answer. So maybe too many questions, Roshan Deep. Let me answer one question first. My thoughts on the Grunfeld. It's a top-tier opening, very good. You have to be comfortable playing without a pawn center and just with free piece play and sort of putting some pressure on your opponent's center. Understand the idea that you're still trying to control and fight for central squares, but without having a classic pawn center. Once you get that idea, it has a very nice free feel. Being able to move the pieces. I like it. It's a great opening. What model games should you refer to? I don't have a set list of model games in the Grunfeld right now, so I don't have that to offer you. I've seen some good games for sure over the years. I just don't know immediately, the player names and the years and all that off the top of my head. But one thing you could do is you could take MVL and Svidler, those two names, search for their games in the Grunfeld, and just grab maybe 20 games from MVL and 20 games from Svidler. Make yourself a little list of games and start playing through some of those. Especially if you could find any that are annotated by either player, that would be great. Because in the 2010s, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave and Peter Svidler were the two top players of the Grunfeld in the world. So just go to their games. We've also got the game of the century, as immortalized up here in this painting. That's Donald Byrne versus Bobby Fischer, 1956. That's a game that everybody should probably play through, whether or not you're a Grunfeld player. You know, it's probably not up to date in terms of theory, but it gives you a nice feel for chess. All right, and so Emergence goes for knight f5. Instead of rushing to trade the rooks, they play knight f5. Now that's risky. The queen's looking at this knight. If knight h6 check, the knight can get away while capturing. If knight f6 check, the queen can come here and defend it. So what white should do is trade the rooks, I think. And black has to take back with the bishop, which is not ideal. If they try to go to the file with the queen, then we've got knight f6 check. So rook e8, you know, it's going to be bishop e8. And then maybe rook d1 next, defending this pawn. Knight f5, white to play here. Apparently, Svidler also has a chessable course on the Grunfeld. But I think Roshan Deep wants to work from model games versus from a course. And in general, like, all opening courses are bad. So even if it's Svidler on the Grunfeld, I would start off with some skepticism before I would buy an opening course. And you can feel my respect for Svidler in the fact that I said go look for his games, but I just feel like most courses are not the way to actually study an opening. They're going to be a bunch of annotated variations instead of annotated games. If there were just a chessable course that was a collection of Svidler's best Grunfeld games annotated by Svidler, if that's what the chessable course were, just a bunch of model games of his annotated by him with his thoughts on the games, then I'd be like, ooh, that's like the treasure for playing the Grunfeld. But if it's a bunch of opening theory and computer analysis, it just makes you think about chess in the wrong way, honestly. Trade happens, bishop recaptures, Emergence doesn't fall into this knight f6 check trap. They've still got the knight covered like this. And Nordovic's going to struggle to find a defense for the d pawn here. And what your diet of puzzles should be, Roshan Deep, that varies between players, you know, so I can't answer that without knowing your profile. I would have to know how good you are in general, how good you are tactically. I'd have to see some of your games, know what your goals are, know how much time you're spending on chess, a whole bunch of stuff. So, stuff I don't know. All right, Nordovic's made a choice, knight to e4. He says, forget about this pawn. I'm sending the Nordovic knights towards the king, right? We are the knights that say, Nordovic, Nordovic. Here they come. Here they come. Interesting. What's going to happen if black, I don't know, plops the queen in the middle of the board? Let's start with that one. Queen d4. This knight, check. This pawn, the queen can no longer take because of the second knight. Queen f5. Threatening knight f6 check. That looks bad for black at first sense. That's correct, Hockey Chess Dude. Sometimes Drew plays sort of like moves that have the feel, but he hasn't worked out all the details to prove and justify them. right? And often he's got the right feel and the move's right, even if he hasn't figured out the concrete justification for it, right? But let's look at knight takes d4 next. Now, is there any kind of knight f6, pawn f6, knight f6? Feels like no. So what's the follow-up there, you know? I mean, rook d1, I think, is like the worst possible follow-up. We've got to move. Black took with the knight, so we're going to see what Drew comes up with. This would be the worst follow-up for Drew. Would be rook d1, knight e2 check, and queen takes d1. Mate. So, right here, white needs to watch out for knight e2 check, knight takes f4. Potentially, they also need to watch out for f5. So there's a lot to watch out for. Multiple things that could go wrong. So what you got, Nordovik? I see one move that avoids f5 and knight e2. The hilarious knight c3. Clearly not the point of knight e4, right? What else could it be? Knight to g3. But that feels claustrophobic for white's queen. It feels less like we're attacking than like we're getting entombed, right? That our queen is being placed in a sarcophagus. So, hey Benedict, how are you doing? I think I saw your name commenting on one or two YouTube videos, from which I think I've learned that your first name is maybe Istvan, and that you teach chess in a couple schools, maybe 4 or 5 schools, huh? You've just lost a 5-hour game. That's a battle. That's a real battle. You know what I haven't done is I haven't tried to look you up on the FIDE website. Now that I know your name, I can look you up there. Whoa, you've got a heck of a FIDE profile picture. That looks like from a professional studio. Beautiful. You liked that podcast, huh? Great. She's got a lot of experience teaching in schools, clearly. Or in a school in particular, but lots of kids in one school. That's your high school prom picture? Oh. Awesome. Yeah, Blorp, queen d3 maybe makes sense here. Queen d3, covering knight e2. Yeah. So was your 5-hour game in a league? What tournament or match is it this morning? I know in Europe there's like lots of weekend league matches. You've already uploaded your game to Chess Dojo. Ha! Yeah, that's a serious player. Oh, they're blitzing out some moves suddenly. Knight d4, queen d3, knight e6, queen c4, queen d5. Oh, man. Knight f6! Oh, no! Emergence played too quickly, and they got Nordovik. They planned this whole sequence. They saw queen d3 coming. Nordovik has won the game. Nordovik. Oh my goodness. Black played this very, very quickly, folks. I was keeping up with the game. They were thinking a long time here, black and white. And when Nordovik played queen d3, black plays pretty quickly. Knight e6, attacking the bishop and the queen, looking for a trade. Queen c4, and of course there's bishop f7, right? A solid move that, I mean, I guess the game would go on. But black has planned and prepared. I've got queen d5, and now you're going to be trading with me, right? Ah! Boom! And Nordovik takes it again. It was probably a dubious pawn sack. After knight d4, it looked like it shouldn't really work for white, didn't it? It felt like he was just kind of scrambling around with his minor pieces without a real target to attack. But now Nordovik might be in the lead in the tournament. Hey, Sagar, how's it going? Are you having fun? Have you had some good games today? Hungarian National Team Championship. Right on, a team championship. You're not playing right now. Yeah. But you played earlier, right? You have some good games today? We're going to go up to the 1700 plus arena now again for another game. Man, that felt like a classic Nordovik game, huh? Oh, wow. Lone Alpaca is in first place in this tournament, despite the presence of Blunderfest and Associativity in this tournament. Wow, Lone Alpaca. And they're in a game right now. Let's check on potentially the winner of this tournament. Lone Alpaca just won their 4th game in this rook endgame. Can white not stop this pawn? I guess we didn't get here in time. Rook check, king here. Rook check, king here. Then you could do something like this. Oddly, I would also consider rook here, but let's go something like here. Normally, black would want room for the king. Is black even winning this position at the end when white resigns? Yes, actually, Sagar is absolutely right. We're going to go check to build the bridge. And then wherever the king goes, d3 or d1, now this is going to be good enough. The rook can block in either direction, and white can't reposition the rook fast enough. Like if you could go rook b8 check, rook b2, rook 2, e1, that would be great. You would win as white, checkmate, right? And if you had rook check, rook here, rook to the b file check, that would also be enough to draw. But here, it looks like this might be the solution, huh? Yeah, I don't see a defense for white of any kind. The closest I see is like this kind of a trick. But black can block like this, right? And clean up with the rook. So. Wow, so Alpaca takes another game. Holy moly. They're in first place in this arena for sure with an hour to go. Let's check on some other games since that was not a full game. I do hear that there's a Charlie versus Nordovik battle, which is very tempting, but we gotta look at games from every section. So we're gonna go to Banana Flipper versus Associativity. This looks like a fun game. We got split pawns for white on the queen side. That's a slight pawn weakness. This is probably a Catalan opening, folks. And in exchange for that slightly hurt structure, white has just a certain activity of their pieces. That said, black has countered the long diagonal for the classic Catalan pressure against b7. So that's nicely done. But now this knight needs to find a home, right? Because white's going to go after it on the b file. And here they must be calculating knight a2. I mean, white must have calculated it before playing bishop c3. And now black must be calculating knight a2. Oh, it's bishop a5. That's not a very long calculation. You have to give up on knight a2 very quickly. Boom. There goes at least an exchange. And if white wants, maybe they try to win your knight instead of the exchange. Or actually, I mean, the best is take the exchange and then pin the knight. It's still pretty tricky to extricate. Okay, so black's thinking here, and it is not clear what to do about this knight. White is getting ready to really bother that piece. So we need a new square for the queen and the knight? We need 2 new squares, huh? That's a lot of squares to ask of black, really, in a short time frame. I think I'm going to review this game, Cigar. Here, this banana flipper versus associativity. Looks like the game for me right now. I mean, I could click around and see if there's an even better game. This one has ended by repetition. And what else is there? We've got Benedict has hopped in and is playing against Jack Stengline. Oh, Benedict joined the tournament. That gives us at least 3 masters playing in this tournament. Incredible. What a tough event. Knight, bishop, queen, rooks. Yeah. That's a cool game. We've got We Shall Win against Digital Chess. Black throwing the G-pawn to try and triumph in the central battle. White leaves the knight hanging. What? And black says, yeah, I can take that knight. What's the plan? Pawn takes pawn. No! Queen's with check! Why are you playing so fast? Rook E8. Oh, they each have more than 15 minutes. These players are just playing bullet. I was tricked by their high ratings, folks. I was tricked by their high ratings. I thought it would be a good game. All right. We could finally see a Cigar game as well. Cigar has started another game. But I'm just a little afraid that Cigar is still listening to the stream, you know? Like, I get this feeling like Cigar doesn't quite understand when to listen and when not to listen. I'm a little worried. Knight b5 from Jack, looking for juice. Black's got the same split pawns as No, I Will Not Cheat, says Cigar, clearly still listening to me. Jack's got the same split pawns that we see for Banana Flipper over here, right? Okay, associativity repositions the queen. A3 comes in. The knight's probably going to head back to A6, which is okay. Maybe it's an okay square. Oh, the knight goes in. The knight goes in. Whew. And I was thinking that white might have this plan of playing E5, but okay, something else comes in pretty quickly. Banana flippers use a lot of time, maybe like a little bit more than is ideal, and so now they're forced to, keep the pace going pretty quickly. I thought there might be this weird idea, folks. E5, and if bishop takes bishop, we take here, attacking that bishop. I thought that might win a piece for white, in which case E5, black wouldn't be able to take on G2, right? They'd have to retreat the knight, and maybe then maybe we could take this knight, so maybe the knight has to go to E8, which is not a very good square, and then we could maybe put this knight on E4 or F3 and keep the pieces on the board. So I didn't have time to look at it because they're playing so fast, but that looked very interesting to me. E5 here as a candidate move. Knight D4 is played. That cuts off the knight's retreat and goes for the bishop pair and E5. This move looks very strong. Bishop A4. Idea, queen takes knight, bishop takes rook, rook takes. That's 2 pieces for a rook, but after E5, black's hoping they come out ahead. It's a long variation. Knight B5, rook D3, knight C7, rook C8, knight B5, A6. And black would come out ahead. Let me double check that for black. So it's a very long variation. There's a good chance that associativity calculated it wrong. Bishop A4, Queen e3, bishop d1, rook d1, e5. Knight b5, rook d3, knight c7, rook c8. Bishop takes e5, defending the knight on c7. Knight d7. Bishop f1, knight e5, bishop d3, knight d3. Bishop f4, g5. Okay, I think it works out for black, but I'm not sure. White plays knight b3. Doesn't challenge the queen d3 variation. But white spent 40 seconds double checking that. That's, a quarter of the time they have left. Am I an IM? Yeah. I am, Cigar. Knight e5. The knight extricates itself, and now one of those split pawns gets targeted. In fact, both of them are getting targeted. And black avoided knight takes c6. What is white to do? Probably rook d to c1, if I had to guess. But, there is queen c4. And also rook c1, there's bishop a3. Oh, no. c5? Can I play c5? Bishop c5. Knight c5, bishop d1 hits my queen. I'd be stressed here as white. I'd be so stressed. Gotta come up with something. Bishop a5, b6, bishop b4. And then if they take on c4, I have the move e5. Bishop a5, bishop b4 trades. Queen c4, knight c4, e5, knight d5. White's played some move. No? Oh, no, their time just went under 1 minute, which made the turn red. That was freaky. All right, both pawns seem to be potentially hanging. Associativity with 3 extra minutes to find a good continuation and try and come out ahead. Bishop a3, that's what I suspected here. There's a weird idea, though, of rook a1, bishop takes c1, rook takes a4. I wonder if associativity double-checked that, because they played in 20 seconds. I would have used a lot of time there as black, because I have the extra time and white's about to fall off the edge. I know if I find the right move, that white won't have enough time to deal with the situation. But did they see this idea of rook a1, bishop c1, rook a4, and the bishop looks trapped? Bishop b2 gets played. What do you guys think of that? Here, here, here. I don't see where this piece goes, right? Like bishop g5, h4. And it's trapped over there, right? MG Weirdo says maybe bishop takes b3 there. Yeah. That gets the pieces out. If rook here, then you get out. And if knight here, then you could take the rook. Good. You solved it for me, MG. Thank you. I was just stressed out from the low time. I couldn't calculate. My mind was going blank. All right, so black's up a pawn, plays a6 to stop knight b5. So now, full extra pawn for black. Some small compensation for white, though. There is f4, e5, rolling these pieces and opening this guy up. This bishop can't get back yet because of this knight. But white's got to be careful. You play a move like f4, maybe black plays queen b6. You never know where the counter tactic's going to come from. White throws f4. Queen b6, c5 looks winning for white, so I think we deal with that. Rook d4, knight d4, queen c5. Pawn takes e5, queen d4. That's an exchange sack. White's okay there. So knight just goes to c6, and white keeps the pieces on the board. This guy's got to be careful. Knight c5 could potentially come. Banana Flipper with 20 seconds to pull off this game is just insufficient to play to the standard that one would like to, especially, if black had 20 seconds too, it would be coin flip. But here, the extra time is a huge advantage for associativity. So, and they're using it. You see them right now using that. Finds a dynamic solution with the queen. Because this bishop, we do need to do something for this bishop, right? So against knight d4 hitting the queen, there's going to be knight takes d4, rook takes queen, knight e2 check, and then taking the rook. That's winning for black. So there's no knight d4. Maybe c5 is likely. Yeah, c5 gets played. Now queen here. Looking at this, there is rook c4. There's a lot of stuff. It's intense. If the knight moves, there's still knight takes knight. 10 seconds for white. Rook c4, queen a3 looks okay for black. Maybe white just wants a simple move, queen e3, defending some things. No, they throw rook c4. There's bishop b5, rook b4, bishop e2, rook b7, which I don't like for black at all. There's rook d1 check. Maybe playable. But after bishop f1, maybe you regret it. So queen a3, that's what I was suspecting. Now black's threatening this. Maybe white's just going to play rook c3. Knight b1. Okay. That knight was suffering too much on that square, so it retreats. But now the queen and bishop have access into the middle of the board here, right? They're connecting with the other black pieces. Maybe knight d4 to keep that rook at bay. Maybe rook c3, keeping more tension. Knight c1, I mean, it was played with 0.7 seconds, but it feels like black should be pretty okay here. Throws rook d1 check. Now there's mate in 1. White needed to play bishop f1 there. Regardless of how unpleasant it might have been, it had to be played. It was the only choice. Oh, and then black was going to have this move bishop b5 maybe. You know? Bishop f1. I think you go rook takes, king takes, bishop b5. That's a nice simplifying maneuver for black, and they're comfortably in the advantage. Associativity double checking the mate in 1 for a minute. Enjoying the picture. They've played something other than mate in 1, folks. It's an interesting choice. Anyone in chat who would have played the mate in 1? No? Yeah. I'm not wrong to think there was a mate in 1, am I? MG Weirdo and Maz both seem to think there was a mate in 1. Was this a surprise? Nobody thought black was going to have like a strike over on the king side. Just, that's not where we're looking as black. We're engaged in a weird tactical battle between all these pieces. Bishop b5. I guess the idea is queen here. There's queen here check, followed by maybe taking this, but it can escape, and the game goes on. Bishop b5. Yeah, interesting. Very interesting game. Very interesting game. Okay. So what you saw in this game is because both players are relatively strong players, right? Like, we've got a master against an expert, basically. Because the players are so strong, they put a lot of time and effort into the opening. Neither of them wanted to get an unfavorable position against a really strong opponent, right? They were afraid, like, even if I get slightly behind, I can't come back against somebody this good. So they invested tons and tons of time in the opening. And then, because of all that effort, the game starts exploding here at bishop b2, rook b2, right? f4, queen into b4. The game explodes suddenly here, and when it does, it's 2 or 3 minutes against half a minute, right? And so the tactical level is not their normal tactical level, right? You could say there's like a blunder or whatever somewhere in here probably, right? That's the nature of that pressure that you put on each other just by being good. You know what I mean? Like, good players put more pressure on other players. You feel this You feel this sense like, oh, if I get into a position that's -1 pawn, I'm definitely going to lose the game, so I can't lose any pawns. And then someone gets so good, you're like, oh, even if I get into a position where they've got a positional advantage, I can never save it. They'll slowly grind me down in an endgame, so I can't even allow a bad position. And the more and more pressure you put on yourself like that, the more you use up your time aiming for perfection and maximal play. And then that in turn will then put pressure on your ability to execute the tactical phase. Even though you're a great tactical player, you then don't have the time you need during the tactical phase. All right, for some reason, Sagar, I couldn't find your game. I clicked around looking for it and it wasn't showing up for me. Now I see it. Now I see it. In the endgame phase, vote for Sagar. You know, I have a friend named Sagar. I would assume Anirudh would be more like maybe like your family name, and Sagar more like your first name, just because I know somebody named Sagar. But looks like you had an equal pawn, rook, and pawn ending with some action. Here. And, I mean, we can conclude that these players played at a very fast pace. Particularly, We Shall Win has executed this game using about 1 minute. So they've played too quickly to really show their chess power, presumably. What kind of chess do these guys play? Whoa. Funny stuff. An offbeat opening. The knights come in to d4 and d5. Very funny opening. Your full name is Anirudh Sagar. But like, do friends call you Anirudh or do they call you Sagar? Which name do you sort of like go by? And wow, look at how they locked it up, both of them, huh? So Sagar's thinking like, yeah, the queen side's locked, and here's where I've got my extra pawn. So I've got some chances here. I think this knight h5 move looks pretty risky insofar as black's letting white take over this diagonal. And I would think that after bishop g4, queen moves anywhere, e5, white would have a good position. I just believe in the power of this bishop here and the black king not having a settled home. After f5, to me, black has some chance of holding things with like a dark square blockade. You go knight g3, f6. Trade off that bishop and that bishop. I see. Yeah, but letting that pawn to f6 really cramps black's king and everything else too, huh? MG, where do you think f5 then, huh? f5? What's the plan after I take it? I mean, f5 is the one move, I guess, where I won't play e5. But if I take, I didn't think that black could oppose me on the light squares. I didn't even calculate this, actually. Obviously, if I were working harder at it, I would calculate it. But I didn't even look at it. I just assumed that I could take. Bishop opposite queen, we're threatening things like f6. So if black goes after, let's say, our rook, we can play f6. And surely that's winning for white. Could also play rook e1 check first if we don't want to give up the rook. Gf5 drops the knight. And yeah, I don't see what black's hoping for here. And let me just give you all like a feel for like my main idea. My main idea is to now play e5. That's so this piece won't be too good. And then if black takes, there are some very pro people in this arena, Sagar. There are 3 masters at least playing in the arena. You've defeated all of them? That's incredible. And then I would do something like this, I think. It's not forced. I could also hold the tension with rook e1, giving black a moment to maybe play this. We could also take and, see if that bishop's really safe on e5. But my main idea would be to now play f5, trying to crack the light squares. And what I want to achieve is this bishop getting into e6 after I trade. Hi, Magda. Welcome to the dojo. And MG Weirdo has provided you some links. You can, based on your rapid rating, you can pick the correct arena and jump right in and play a game if you like. So I like this approach. Sagar, you went for f5 and your opponent allowed f6. Yeah, my concern would have been bishop e5. Oh, but I guess you could now trade, and get the same thing that I kind of wanted. That makes sense. A classical game down a piece. That doesn't happen every day. Bit of a comeback for Pandas. Oh, look. Magna's right in. Found their way in quickly. And right into a match against Sagar. And let me just check this thing. Sagar said that they'd beaten all the top players in this tournament. Ardwolf. Subanka. Count Grishuk. Allen. We shall win. Okay, so they didn't get paired against the Masters for whatever reason. But they did win every game they've played so far. Oh, you've beaten those players previously, all the other top players. But clearly you're listening to me, Sagar. I can't talk about your game. It's very, very clear that you're listening to me. Very, very clear. That's why I just reviewed a game of yours that was finished instead of a game of yours that was live. Because it's very clear that you're listening to the stream the whole time you're playing. Hey, Marco, it's been a while. How are you doing? Let's click back to this game here for a little bit. Let's see how this is going. Benedict. Looks like Benedict's up a pawn, slowly trying to castle the king by hand. Hoping to eventually use these queenside pawns. Yeah, Sagar, you're somehow playing like Bullet while listening to the stream and talking to us and still winning every game. I don't know how you do it, but it is somehow, it's not the normal recipe, but it's somehow working very well for you. Nefer, yeah. To play in the under 1300 section, you don't need to have played any games before. But if you want to play in the higher section, we want people to have played a few games before, just so that they've got a rating that places them in the correct section. And all. Okay, so Jack says if your king tucks away, we're going to win the pawn on e6. That makes sense. That makes sense. Doing great, Ranga. Having a nice weekend. As you can see, I've moved the weekend tournament from Saturdays to Sundays. Getting out of the way of my daughter's ballet class. My son's chess. My son has a basketball thing on Saturday now, and my daughter has a ballet thing, so lets me do more commentary more freely. H6, challenging that bishop. White could even play the move H4 here. Trading on F6 is plausible. Retreating is plausible. The one thing is this queen is sort of sneak covering H5. So you can't trade on either square and then get in with queen H5, you know? yeah, next week hopefully you'll be ready and you'll be very welcome to play Nefer. I'm sorry that we didn't get you in today, but it's no big deal, right? Because there's a tournament every week. There's no like need or rush to get into today's tournament. This is Jack, the Dojo tech guy, indeed. Prophylaxis. Benedict's got this extra 5 minutes on the clock, so the position's super complicated, but I always think in these situations that the extra time on the clock is worth a lot. That said, Jack's got a very strong move here, knight f5, right? Even rook f5 works. Jack goes for rook g3. Benedict's not using enough of their time, I think. I don't know, they've played a few moves too quickly here, but knight f5 was like an easy shot from white, right? If pawn takes, check, here, check, here, check. It's mate. It's not just a perpetual, right? And knight f5 threatens queen g7 to e7, and it threatens knight h6. I think white's blowing black away in that line. Okay, Jack pressures the h-pawn, but the rook trade takes most of the pressure off black. I think also it's interesting question, but this move rook f5 might also be enough for white to be, let's say, equal, because the idea is pawn takes, queen check, and then you've got a perpetual here and here. And if the king went to g7, you'd have knight f5 check, right? And they have to give up the queen. So yeah, knight f5 though, I think that was like the winning shot. I mean, black can maybe keep the game going. Maybe it's still complicated, but it's good for white. And now Jack just doesn't have enough time to execute this game. Fu says, should black just give the queen against either move, really, right? Yeah, probably. That might be the best way to keep the game going. Queen, rook, pawn takes. That's probably the best try. But there is queen h5, rook e7 still, isn't there? If we don't go for this f-pawn, isn't black okay? Let's see. Check. If here I get rook e7 with check, right? So you go here maybe. Check. Here. Check. Here. Check. Here. And now I suspect that... Oops. Black has one on time, indeed, as expected. Where did my line go? It's gone. Okay. So let's look at this again. Knight f5, queen takes, rook takes, pawn takes, check, here, check, here, check, here, here. In this position, there's rook e3 and rook e7. Sorry, king h8. Rook e3 and rook e7. Possibly both of them checkmate. So, yeah, I think very, very instructive moment in this game. The moment black plays h6, it opens up the g6 square, which is just enough to make this knight f5 sack work. I don't know if white was threatening knight f5 if black played like a5 or something here. Let's check that for instructional purposes for ourselves. We threaten checkmate, and if rook g8, we have knight h6 with at least a good advantage for white, right? Probably an instantaneous forced mate as well, but at least good for white. So let's go takes, check, here. And does this work with the h-pawn, right? You see the mate is much harder to execute with the h-pawn. So if we go rook e7, there's back rank mate here. But we can go rook g3, covering this. King here. And then rook e7, and the queen's covering the mate. This is a very close call after rook f7. Rook f7. The queen's still covering the mate and the rook. Queen f7. If we had this other rook on the open file, right, then black would defend. It looks like it might still work for white, even here. Am I missing a defense for black? E5, queen h5, king g8, rook g3, rook a7. Yeah, it looks like it still works. Man, when I first looked at this position, I didn't realize that black was in danger. I didn't see knight f5 coming. When I first saw this position, I thought jack does not have enough for his pawn, right? He brought the rook here, and I said, okay, it's good. He's creating some pressure, you know, but I didn't realize that this knight f5 became a threat here. Which means maybe the best move for black is a hard-to-see move, rook cd8, preparing back rank mate. And that seems to restrain the knight f5 threat, at least on the current move. But once black played h6, now we're forced to do something concrete, right? Black forces us to like deal with something immediate. And once black played h6, I'm like, oh, I see what to do. If you're going to force me to do something, I can do this. I don't know how long it would have taken me to come up with it otherwise. Like if black played a5, I don't know if I would have found this move. In a classical game, of course I would, but you know, 1 minute on the clock in a rapid game, you never know when you're gonna find your shot. Nobody can waste your time, Cigar. You could waste your own time by not thinking about your games. Very, very impressive M-maxing, right? Also seems to have never been in a Twitch chat room before. Yeah. So this was actually a very, very tense and close position at this point, right? Really hard to know who's got the advantage and by how much. I think another important option for Benedict maybe would have been to just play king g8 and say, who cares about the e-pawn, right? It threatens this bishop with queen and bishop. I don't know how much Benedict was saying. Oh, but white doesn't take the e-pawn. They just take the piece and then the piece. Oh, yeah, never mind. Can't be done. So it can't be done at all. Oh, so it's real pressure here. I was thinking, like, maybe you have the choice to, you know, like, bail out. Like, we trade things. I can't show you my variation because it's illegal, but it's like gf6, knight e6, knight e6, queen e6, queen e6, rook e6, rook c3. You know, I was thinking maybe black could just say, yeah, you get the e-pawn, but I get out of this middle game. But no, king g8 just loses the piece because of this this pin on the g-pawn. So there's no simple answers here for black. No simple answers. I wonder, Benedict, did you feel like you were under pressure or like you were winning or like it was close? Like, what was your kind of feeling live in the game? Because I basically felt like white was scrambling to get some pressure, but it was insufficient. That was my instinct, but I hadn't followed the game for, like, I missed like 5 moves before this. And now I'm feeling like we're almost looking for an only move for black. Like rook d8 or king e7. I'm feeling like we're actually under real pressure. You thought you might be worse, and so you put pressure on his clock. That makes sense. So like king here, which somebody just suggested, normally that's going to be bad to some version of like the queen getting into g7. Oddly enough, it might be bishop h4 instead of bishop f6, because bishop f6, pawn takes, queen check, there's this move. But bishop h4, with the idea that if black takes, you take here, that wins the rook. So bishop h4 is an interesting move. Amy Michelle thinks we've got c4 maybe for white here. If the queen takes, we win her because that bishop can't recapture. And if the queen takes here, then knight c6 or f5, right? Whoops, sorry, my computer's not dealing with the speed. So Amy's right. White could definitely play c4. The queen has to retreat while keeping this pawn defended, right? So queen, not d6 because of knight f5, let's say. So queen d7. It's not amazing, but possible. What about this simple move as well? Oh, queen g5. Yeah, sorry. Benedict points out there's queen g5 now. Queen takes, bishop takes. That piece has been unpinned. I guess that's the point of king e7. It's forcing this tension. So I think we can't play c4 here. C4 could still work. Okay, let's see it. Here, here, rook e6. Oh my god, that's intense. Yeah, here, here. White has sacked a rook. So they need something very, very good. And there's back rank mate here, so let's be very, very careful as well. It looks like white could maybe force the queen for rook trade and then play queen and knight against two rooks and bishop. You could definitely grab this pawn too. You're threatening knight e6. So black's king has to move. Here there's this. So you could force the king back. What I really want to do is somehow knight c6, rook d3, king, but this stuff usually doesn't quite work because of our back rank. You know, normally we can't get away with something like this because of queen c1 at the end. It's very hard to make that whole thing work. It's true that white has at least a perpetual, so this is not an improbable variation. There might be a way to get more out of it than perpetual. King d8. Rook e3, black could go takes. My other game got taken away. I lost it. But that was a really fun, situation there. I think with such a rich position, Benedict and Jack would have had even more fun in a classical game, right? Because a classical game lets players of that level calculate, 6-7 moves ahead, which is sort of a fun thing to do in chess, right? A position like that, rook sacks, chasing the king. Yeah, there were a few really cool variations. There was room for creativity there. It wasn't just like one straightforward variation. Yeah, that was the right level of position for me. I would have really enjoyed it. All right, I'm going to wrap up the commentary here for today.